think we'll be in shock. I'll put it that way.
Thank you for asking.
As I said, there's no surprise at this point anymore. So.
Some days we wind up further back.
It is cold in here. It's nice. I can't use what it's been definitely it's hot, but
Thank
I
you.
don't know. Yeah.
Have someone online to talk about Ethan, or should I? So I don't need to.
I think you should do it and then ask her
Okay.
too.
All right.
She's the principal at Brown.
All right, we are going to call to order the April 6th, 2026 meeting of the Newton School Committee. We'll begin with the pledge, as we usually do. We have Ethan Thomas, a sixth grader from Brown, to lead the pledge today. I'll say this from his school leaders, and then I believe we have a leader online who will make some comments. Ethan is a bright, friendly, and funny sixth grader at Brown Middle School. He is a bright light in our community and brings joy to everyone he interacts with. Ethan loves to travel and attend sporting events, most recently having been to Florida and a Boston Bruins game. Ethan loves to learn. You can always find him working hard in one of his classes. He holds himself to a very high standard and spends every day pushing himself to reach his goals. And I don't know if we have Kim on.
Yeah, here she comes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Lysett. I'm the principal at Brown. Hi, Ethan. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you tonight, but I am so proud that you're representing Brown as one of our valued Brown Bears in the Pledge of Allegiance. You bring joy to me every day that I talk to you. So thanks for doing this tonight for us.
Come on up. There's no obligation to participate, but if you'd like to.
You are able and to all deserve peace and life for the better reason. I better read it to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Awesome. Awesome.
Thank you. I have to thank my principal, Miss White, for being, my helper here. So at Bound, there are so many classes. I think my teachers that might not be here, but I think help me. And I like to say one of my favorite classes might be my science class where I learn so much, and I like to so thank you for my teachers. Thank you.
Very nice. Very nice.
Ethan.
Rocked it.
We will move to public comment, and good luck beating that, folks. So this is a time reserved for the public to share their concerns and perspective. We won't respond during the meeting, but we will listen and consider your feedback. You may also reach out directly to us. Our contact information is on the website. Remote speakers, please ensure that your Zoom name matches the name that you use to request to speak, and unmute when your name is called. We'll start with our two Zoom folks tonight. In-person speakers, I'll call names from the list and let you know when to come up. If you can talk directly into the microphone, as Ethan demonstrated, thank you. That would be great. You'll have 3 minutes. You'll get a 2.5-minute warning from Jason as gently as he can say it. And please start by stating your name and address. So remote speakers, we have Laura Tauvim and Janet Sturman. So if we could start with Laura.
And Ethan and Mom, feel free to stay as long as you want or not.
Hi. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Laura Tovum. I live at 61 Islington Road. I'm the parent of 2 children who both received an excellent education here in Newton. My older child entered middle school just as NPS removed tracking from 8th grade math. Despite this, he graduated last year, having successfully completed AP BC Calculus. He just finished linear algebra in his first year of college. He was fully prepared by this district for this high level of college math. My younger child, currently at Newton North, has been deeply supported by caring, dedicated school guidance counselors and mental health professionals. It's a wonderful thing that my very different children could both be challenged, engaged, and supported by the same school system. I've lived in Newton since 2006, and I'm very concerned that the pendulum is swinging in the wrong direction. One major swing was in 2014, after 3 Newton students tragically died by suicide in a 4-month span. Those events forced a broader community reckoning about student stress, mental health, and the demands we are placing on our youth. I remember with profound relief that our district made systemic changes to de-escalate that stressful environment. We refocused on the whole child, implementing suicide prevention programming, and a later start time for high school students. Additional changes, including homework limits and staggered assessments, as well as cautioning against an overly rigorous course load, further protect student mental health, which is a prerequisite to learning. Similarly, our DEI department is not an extra. It is the infrastructure of our commitment to making our schools fair and inclusive. Since hiring a DEI director, we have successfully increased the percentage of educators of color and increased the enrollment of underrepresented students in advanced math and science classes. These types of changes correlate with gains in academic achievement. One of the things I value most about MPS is that it prepares students for the real world, where they must collaborate with people who think, learn, and live differently from them. From ancient Greece to modern educational research and practice, the most enduring models of education understand that learning is not a narrow race towards a single test score. It is about the full cultivation of human beings capable of thriving in a complex world. When we talk about eliminating DEI leadership or pulling back on the social emotional guardrails, we are risking a return to prior policies that harmed our children.
30 seconds.
If we dismantle these supports, we are all but guaranteeing that that pendulum will swing back in a few years. Please take a step back and make sure the decisions made tonight or in the near future honor the lessons of the past and protect the positions that support our children, preparing them to succeed in school and in the diverse and changing world they will enter in the future as adults. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet Sturman is next. She didn't. Okay. We will move to folks in the room and we will start with Michelle
Yeah,
Faniston.
Janet is joining.
Oh. Well, Michelle and Zach, you're up next.
On deck.
So the Zoom speaker is going or is not? I thought they said she was here. Okay. Janet, can you unmute and join?
Cool. Good timing. I just had to take a bio break. So, hi everybody. Janet Sturman. I live at 120 Church Street in Newton. I just want to say I'm really excited that you're going to be voting on reinstating this math program in Newton, because I can't tell you how important math was in my education when growing up. And I think that from what I read about the Russian School of Math in Newton, back in 2017, the founder of the Russian School of Math said that 1/5 of the Newton Elementary students were attending RSM for, additional math education, which I think is outrageous that we are unable to fulfill our math education, unable to provide the right kind of math education to the students in Newton. That was in 2017. I don't have more current statistics, but I do know that the Russian School of Math sees about 2,600 students weekly. And of course, they're not all from Newton. They're from all adjacent towns. I'm talking about the Newton location, of course. But I'm really looking forward to the school committee doing the right thing and reinstating the math programs that we had cut in our budget in the past. I know that we've got some serious budgetary issues going on, and I hope I can count on you to reinstate math education as being a priority in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. So Michelle and followed by Zach. Good evening. By every metric that Newton uses to measure success, my kids look fine. High scores, good placements, we've got all the things. But these high scores are not the same thing as being okay. To wit, suicidal ideation is something we live with in my household. My children tell me, and I see the texts because I am that mom, about suicidal ideation in their friends as well. And I promise you, no parent here wants to think about this. They don't want to know that it is their kid. It is their kid.
None of the test scores, no accelerated math, or college acceptance letters matter if the kid is not here with us. I keep hearing that we have to choose between math and DEI, mental health coordination, and sustainability. It is a false choice. The child who needs accelerated math is often the same child who is in mental health crisis. These are not competing priorities. These are the same kids. Calvin Coolidge said, "Nothing in this world can take place of persistence. Genius will not, education will not. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent." We ask persistence of our students every single day. And tonight, we are about to show them that we won't ask it of ourselves. DEI too tough? Well, let's cut it. Mental health coordinator in year 2? Not for us. Sustainability? Unsustainable. Help for kids on IEPs? No persistence there either. The Education Stabilization Fund exists exactly for this moment. The gap is about $500,000 as I understand it. It is not insurmountable. I urge you to defer any considered vote tonight. Do the work. Show our students that we too can press on and be the community that we say that we are. Thank you.
Thank you. After Zach, we have Jenna Myra.
My name is Zachary Fannensteel. I live at 367 Lowell Avenue. I'm a Newton North senior. Go Tigers! Distinguished committee members, I am before you today to discuss the proposed changes to accommodate the budget, and I wish to address several points about it. There is a narrative circulating about our math department that does not match reality. We've heard people say that it is bad or failing. But as someone who is actually sitting at those desks, I can tell you that is not only wrong, but insulting. I have had an amazing math education here. Every single math class I have taken at North has been one of the best parts of my academic year. When people bring up better schools for comparison, they are cherry-picking data to fit a narrative. They are not looking at the daily growth, the teacher dedication, or the actual classroom experience that I and many others have had. The proposal to cut DEI funding is a short-term fix for a long-term problem. Let's be honest about what this is: a one-year Band-Aid on a larger budget issue. If we sacrifice these programs today to fund math for 1 out of 5 years, what is on the chopping block next? History? The arts? We cannot keep cannibalizing our school's culture for a temporary solution to a non-existent problem. Finally, we need to look at who the cuts actually affect. The DEI and mental health supports aren't just extra. They are the very systems that allow students to succeed in the first place. The kids who benefit most from these programs are the ones who need these supports to stay engaged in their education, including their math classes. I know these students. They're my friends. I see the impact these support systems have on their lives every day. To cut these programs isn't just a budget move. It's a direct hit to the students who are already working the hardest. Let's stop using a math crisis that doesn't exist to justify cutting the support systems we desperately need. Let's protect programs that make Newton Public Schools a place where every student can actually learn. Thank you.
After Jenna Myra.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Badeau. I live at 33 Gay Street, and I am reading on Jenna's behalf because she's sick. I know that, like me, you want all NPS students to thrive and that you have been working hard to close the budget gap. You've made some important progress, but I worry that you are about to fumble on the 1-yard line with devastating impacts. You are on the verge of a historic achievement in school funding and positive improvements to the NPS budget process. It would be a missed opportunity to let a $500,000 gap overshadow that success. Allowing such a relatively small shortfall to trigger layoffs in critical student support areas like mental health, behavioral supports, DEI, and planning and sustainability risks more years of civic disunity, students falling through the cracks, and staff burnout. Cutting the superintendent's leadership team now, only to replace them once the structural deficit is solved, is an unnecessary expense and will create administrative instability that will make it more difficult to implement important initiatives that families are counting on, like the new middle school math program. It also burdens educators and administrators with even more changes on top of what many of you have recognized is already an extremely high and challenging rate of change. Cuts like these always cost more in the long run. By contrast, showing that the new administration can solve these tough challenges without the usual acrimony would be a powerful signal of leadership and ensure the district doesn't lose the momentum of its current strategic plan. There is a practical and financially responsible path forward. The Education Stabilization Fund, ESF, has outperformed interest projections for the last 2 years, and interest rates are likely to remain relatively high through the next fiscal year. The ESF earned nearly $1 million in interest in FY25 and is on track to earn $725,000 to $745,000 in interest in fiscal year 26. In addition, help is on the way. The mayor's pension restructuring plan will soon provide critical budget relief, and members of this committee have proposed several promising tools for shrinking the structural deficit in coming years. So we can afford to bridge this gap now. Taking a modest additional distribution from the ESF will not meaningfully impact the fund's longevity and will have no impact on any other city department or service. But it will have an enormous impact on MPS's ability to serve all students well and on the community's trust in the schools and city leadership. Mayor Laredo, I hope you will see this as a prudent and important last mile investment. 3 generations of my family live in Newton. I have heard from many residents of all ages who do not have students in MPS, but who want Newton schools to continue to be a source of pride and strength for all of Newton. I hope you will find a way to a middle ground that benefits our entire community. For the whole school committee, your leadership in finding this middle ground would be a significant win for the city's morale. It will also create a fertile ground for community support of future MPS initiatives.
Sorry, I have to cut you off. Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Alexander Lee, followed by Corey Pop, and Sue Cohen.
I'll be brief. I've sent you my comments. I don't know if you read them or not, but I will not read them tonight. I will just say, slow down. You're moving too fast. I really hope that you'll take a little bit longer to answer the questions that the public have about how you're going to move responsibilities from some people who may lose their jobs to other people in the city and other people in the school district. And I hope that you'll reassure the public that there's money for several years of math. I think the math is probably a good idea. I don't know too much about math. I'm a history teacher. My son knows a lot about it. He's been happy at Newton North, but I really hope that you'll take the time and not bring this to a vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Pop and Sue Cohen. Followed by Madeline McNeely.
I'll get started. Okay. Hi, I'm Corey Pop. I live at 16 Hovey Road in Waltham. And I'm Sue Cohen. I live at 124 Mount Vernon Street, West Newton. And we are both, we'd like to say hello, school committee, mayor, and Dr. Nolan. We are both educators from the 1900s. We've been in Newton, actually. And we're here today to talk about the mental health supports at the high schools. Since many of you are new, you may not know the history of supports at the secondary level and how the system has changed for general education students in the past 3 years. With the elimination of Harbor High in 2023 and Springboard in 2025, MPS has eliminated all mental health programs for general education students without IEPs. And both of those programs did also accept students with IEPs. While there are still numerous interventions available for general education students, including the new Bright North and Bright South, there is neither any long-term nor off-site program available for students without IEPs who need either extended support or support away from the larger school building, nor is there any remaining programmatic support for credit recovery for students who have missed school due to any health challenges. The intersection of MTSS and special education is a complicated one from both a legal and budgetary perspective, and this space is where the problem lies, while our schools are scrambling to find sufficient supports for students for whom MTSS isn't enough, but for whom an IEP might not be appropriate. Furthermore, the proposed elimination of the coordinator of SEL and mental health position further strains mental health supports for all students. This budgetary crisis will inevitably lead to higher rates of special education referrals, increased school avoidance, and an exacerbation of discrepancies in the achievement gap. Mental health supports in our district are no longer just a special education problem, but a systems problem. As you look for creative ways to stretch the budget and provide more support with fewer resources, I appeal first to the mayor to increase funding for mental health specifically, and also to the school committee and administration to review the gap between support needed and support available in light of the choices available for positions and programs eliminated. There are many such needs across our district, to be sure, but providing general education support for students who need programmatic support is not only essential, but also a cost savings in the long run.
So, if you all truly believe, and I quote from the NPS website, that NPS is where every student can thrive, then please put your money where your mouth is, school committee, and let's all work together to provide the staffing needed to help all students thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. After Madeline McNeely, we have Amelia Oliver and Enrique Rosero.
Good evening, Madeline McNeely, 68 Jewett Street. Just want to start with a quote. Brene Brown has a podcast with Adam Grant from the Curiosity Shop, and she says, "Protecting power and privilege is morally irresponsible." You are a new committee. You're a new mayor. You have a chance to write a new beginning. Yourselves, for the community, for all of us. In this process, the mayor decides the budget allocation. It looks like the school committee gets strong-armed into agreeing or not agreeing after pushing and prodding and negotiations. And we've learned that you're pleased with yourselves for being polite with each other, which is compared to your previous administration. But I wonder what's more important, politeness or doing the right thing? Then I think about what happens to one of the most important stakeholders in this process, your superintendent. She has to cave into power dynamics too. She offers options that are not viable. I think she probably knows they're not really viable, but she's caught between a rock and a hard place. I want to know where those options came from, who decided those options, but that's a whole nother conversation. What she does do well is narrow to three options and negotiations. And she actually pushes back on the power dynamics with option C. Option C, the headline, "Reject all options, work towards an alternate budget entirely." As school committee members, I don't know if you've been strong enough to collectively say, yes, option C, because it means no to the mayor. So are you really going to end up endorsing a budget cut that none of you are happy with because the mayor has the final decision? We don't need a civics class, but this isn't a vote. This is not democracy. At some point, you're going to decide that you've done enough pushing, enough negotiating, and you're going to give up. And so endorsing a budget that no one thinks is a good one, is that what we want to teach our children? Is that how we want to spend our tax dollars? So what this process does, it keeps decision-making authority in the hands of the mayor and forces people to make decisions that are not in the best interest of stakeholders. It maintains the status quo, which it seems unfortunate that it's no different than previous years, although in previous years, I think money did show up. If you'd like to learn how to facilitate collaborative decision-making processes, I'm happy to talk to you all about it. But I want to close again with this quote: protecting power and privilege is morally irresponsible. Thank you.
Thank you. Amelia Oliver.
My name is Amelia Oliver. I live at 20 Trowbridge Avenue. It's good to see you guys. Thank you for all your time. Thank you for reading our letters. Thank you for replying. We appreciate you. The kids in 6th grade today were in kindergarten when COVID hit. Any 6th grade parents? So my kids were in 1st, 3rd, and 5th. But I'm not going to tell that story. I also remember last year when everybody was reading, or the school committee was reading Anxious Generation. I think Chair Peterloo and Dr. Nolan, we were at a discussion at Newton North. And now here we are about to walk away from district level mental health coordination and staff support as the COVID cohort moves through middle and high school. We're about to walk away from accountability on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we're about to walk away from engaging on sustainability in our schools. If embedding the roles is the answer, let's think about what it would look like to embed one of the roles that we're not cutting, like family engagement. So I'm sure we are fortunate to have many leaders with deep expertise in family engagement. It's in our DNA. That's where it should be. Maybe they won't be able to go to all the meetings. We're telling ourselves that we can do this job just because we believe it. But let's not kid ourselves. We're funding what we think is important. We're setting the tone at the top right here today. Everyone in the district and the city will understand that sustainability, trying to do anything about opportunity gaps, and district level mental health strategy are no longer our priorities. And we're talking about a few $100,000. As Jonathan pointed out a couple weeks ago, this amount of money is so small that it is a rounding error in the city's budget. And we're not even going to save this money in real life, right? We know it's going to get spent on consultants and stipends. It's just not budgeted for staff. There are options. The schools have cut a lot. Pull from the stabilization fund. Use the city's general fund to purchase some other one-time item like $200,000 of admin software on page 76, line 235. The people who've been around the block know how this works. What I'm trying to say is, this is actually not about money. The thing that we don't have enough of
30 seconds.
is will. The people are asking. There are solutions in front of you. Find the will. That's why we elected you. Save these positions so that the 6th graders who started school in the pandemic will be supported, seen, and academically engaged, so all of our students and our staff and our beautiful Garden City can thrive. Thank you.
After Enrique Rosero, we have Allison Zakaric and Riel Montag.
I'm going to read from the City Council docket tonight. Refer to the Finance Committee 124-26, authorization to petition the General Court for special legislation. His Majesty the Mayor requesting authorization to petition the General Court for special legislation to allow the City of Newton to issue pension obligation bonds or notes for the purpose of funding all or a portion of the unfunded pension liability of the retirement system of the City of Newton. That's great news. The city is expected to contribute on the order of $58 million in FY27 to the pension liability. It's among the line items in the budget that grows at a faster rate than even NPS. The significant annual appropriation increases of this aggressive funding schedule aim to eliminate the unfunded liability by 2032, 8 years ahead of deadline. Bonding this bonding this liability will alleviate the pressure of this ballooning item on the city budget. Both liability financing and higher interest earnings mean that the withdrawal schedule of the Education Stabilization Fund does not need to be as rigid as planned under original assumptions. This in turn questions whether we actually cannot afford to use an extra couple $100,000 from the ESF, especially if not doing so will result in painful cuts, larger future costs, and increased risks. Mayor Laredo has demanded of each of NPS's departments to justify every line item. He has not afforded us the same transparency. His administration has not made public his free cash availability, the current balance of the ESF, and what the revised withdrawal schedule is. Mr. Laredo has not once justified his continued refusal to entertain different appeals from members of this committee and the public to revisit the amount coming from the ESF. He has been equally taciturn and unyielding about explaining why any other solution to funding these key positions that are being cut is not viable. The public deserves an explanation. No, the allocation is the allocation, because I said so, are not explanations. In closing, I'm going to quote from my prior school rep, Mr. Paul Levy, said, "Argue with our conclusions, present other evidence, disagree if you like. Meanwhile, ask your mayor, city councilors, school committee members questions and give them your suggestions. But hold them accountable. They are the ones who are being paid to come up with solutions. So please do your jobs, find the money, don't cut these positions." Thank you.
Thank you. Allison? Hello, Allison Zaharik. I'm at 259 Cherry Street, and I'm going to get my readers on so I can see this. First of all, thank you, Mayor Laredo, for the 5.75% increase you're providing to the schools. This is very, very generous by historical standards, and I think I can say we really appreciate it, and it's wonderful to have you here. I'm thrilled that you're our new mayor. I didn't write that part in, I just threw that in. I'd like to first make a point about future years and a bit of a process point. You've shared that you plan to provide our schools with a 4.9% increase each year in the next 2 years. I humbly ask that you allow the superintendent to first share the needs of the schools before you decide this. Second, I'd like to ask you, Mayor Laredo, to please use the power that I and many others entrusted in you when we elected you to find a way to solve this funding shortfall. I can't pretend to be an expert, but would like to see you aggressively pursue the pension obligation bond and an operating override. The last 3 years have educated many citizens in Newton about the increasingly precarious situation NPS is in, and I believe it would pass. We need investment and not cuts. And you're the one person in this room who can find that investment for us. And I ask you to use your political capital to support our schools and allow our community to rise up and show you how much we support our schools. This is a crisis. You are a different leader, and we are a different city than we were several years ago. Please use your power to support our kids. Thank you. Thank you. Riel? After Riel, we have Jane France and Irina Teslar.
I'm Riel Montag. I live on Berkeley Street in West Newton. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, so excuse my casual demeanor. I am missing a 7th grade information session about the new flex schedule at Newton, but I mean at Day Middle School, because that's one of the many changes I'm trying to grapple with as a parent of a 7th grader and an 8th grader with math plus other stuff. But I think it's just really important to talk about values, especially in this day and age. I'm going to just, I guess, keep showing up to talk about values because it matters so much. Last week, I heard from many people asking you to do the math. I think in the past week, hopefully you've heard from a lot of other parents and other voices that share values like mine and have asked you to think about some other things. I'm hoping tonight that you'll come to recognize that cutting our values just doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. Honestly, in a place like Newton, it's shocking that we have to choose between affording opportunities for academic challenge and elements of NPS that uphold our core values and provide support for students that likely face greater challenges in school. It appears that you're rushing to implement an accelerated math curriculum that we cannot afford to appease a vocal group of Newton parents at the expense of the well-being of the greater student community here in Newton. I'm struggling to understand how this group comes to the consensus that it is okay to sacrifice our commitment to our children's well-being so that a selected few students can take advanced math classes sooner. I say that as somebody who has been in honors classes in public school throughout my entire education. I've taken AP Calculus, scored very well on the math SATs, to humble brag. So I'm not somebody who doesn't believe in math. But do you think that mental health is no longer a concern in our schools? I can tell you from personal experience that current staffing is insufficient to meet the current needs. Do you think that seeking diversity, equity, and inclusion is no longer necessary? Are you ready to walk away from that Thrive promise for all of our students? I can tell you from experience that teachers aren't necessarily equipped to handle racist incidents in the classroom. I wrote to you guys last week about something that happened to my daughter. Haven't really heard much in response to that. A review of the district's report card will tell you that there are academic achievement gaps between different demographics here in Newton. We've talked a lot about the need for accelerated math class and for students at the upper level of our academic spectrum, but not so much about the kids that have more needs. I want NPS to provide fantastic academic opportunities to our students, but I also want it to provide a well-rounded education that nourishes the whole of each child, not just their academic ability. Is that really too much to ask for? Thank you.
Thank you. Jane and then Irina.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Jane Franz and I live at 12 Glastonbury Oval. I recently reviewed the October 6th presentation to the school committee of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, as well as the results of the 2025 survey itself, with a focus on pages 43 through 50. The data from this YRBS survey is clear. Newton middle and high school students experience an unacceptable level of stress. 67% of high school students reported that their life was somewhat or very stressful, and 20% reported feeling so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more that they stopped doing their usual activities. At the middle school level, 47% of the students reported an unacceptable level of stress, and 15% reported feeling so sad and hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks that they stopped doing some usual activities. Just as disturbing, 4 groups reported somewhat or significantly higher levels of stress and hopelessness than their peers. African American students, LGBTQI plus students, students with in special ed programs, and girls reported higher levels of stress and feeling sad and hopeless. In the October 5th presentation, the Mental Health Working Group presented this vision for the future. To ensure students thrive in NPS and beyond, we need an integrated, fluid continuum of proactive and reactive tools, curriculum, interventions, and staff. These resources should be provided in a trust-centered environment to stabilize and support both students and staff. The loss of the secondary mental health leadership position and cuts to DEI and the ABA positions leave me concerned that we're abandoning a value that this community has always stood for, the well-being of every individual, but most importantly, the most vulnerable and those who have been marginalized. These results should lead this school system to make mental health a top priority and one that is reflected in the school budget. I urge the reinstatement of these positions to ensure that the school system moves forward in addressing the significant student mental health needs. Thank you for all you do for NPS and for the city of Newton.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Irina Tesler. I'll try to make it in less than 3 minutes. I live in Newton. My family lived in Newton since 94. Does it work? Okay. I have a graduate of year 2000. In the family, I have a graduate of 2017. We have a 6th grader and we have a 2nd grader. So in other words, I have a long history with the Newton Public Schools. And I'm not saying I've seen it all. You've seen it all. But it's been ups and downs, and it's always difficult choices. I want to start with, I'm sincerely hoping that there will be a way to close the budget gap. But we all know that what we hope for and the reality does not always match. And if we have to deal with what we have, with the money that are allocated to us, I'm here to advocate for you to vote for Plan B. And I don't want you to think that I underestimate the importance of the mental health of the children. I actually think that providing subjects on the different level is extremely important. We are not one size fits all. We all learn in a different way. And it is important for people to succeed, to be offered the subject in a way that they can learn. It's not enough to teach. We also need to give them instruments to learn. So to me, it's important that it's not only what we teach, but how we teach. And having different levels in math and in literature and in history and drama and music would it be ideal. Truly would it be a dream come true. But we have to start somewhere. I have to tell you that the level of the math is offered degraded substantially since the 94 when we started. My older daughter was actually a 7th grader. And I mean, I can help at home. Not every parent can help. So I do think that it would be important that the school can provide different levels. I do think that the primary responsibility of school is provide a good education. And reading, writing, and math is a foundation. Without knowing an alphabet and knowing digits,
Your time is up.
cannot really move forward. So I will try to finish up. We need to have students who excel in math and science. We need future engineers who will build things for us to help
Thank you so
people
much.
who need the handicap. So please vote for Plan B.
Great. That concludes public comment. So we will move directly to the consent agenda, which contains meeting minutes from March 23rd, March 30th, and then also the legislative special meeting on March 30th, as well as some grants. So is there anything that a member would like to pull from the consent agenda? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Second? There a second?
A second.
Okay. All right, let's vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yep.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7 is yes. Ward 8?
Yes.
Mayor Laredo?
Yes.
Consent agenda passes. So moving to our discussion items, do you want to start with the superintendent's update?
Just a brief update since we've been on a budget discussion only kind of zone. Just bringing us back to reality that it's MCAS season at all of our schools, grades 3 to 8 and 10, and that's happening now in the schools. And it ushers in the beginning of a more compressed testing season than we've had in the past. And obviously the first testing season since the graduation requirement was removed for MCAS, just reminding the public about that. We are still required to give the MCAS assessment and students are still required to report on it. Our annual yearly progress from the Department of Education is judged on whether students participate and how they do when they participate. I just had a lot of questions from parents like, do I even need to send my child to this? Answer, yes, please do. The stakes, of course, are lower for our 10th graders when they take this test now. I also, just shifting gears, wanted to share that we had our first realtor education event with about 35 realtors from across the city and various companion towns who joined us for a Q&A. We gave them a toolkit on Newton Public Schools, the real truth about buffer zones, activities, handbooks, strategic plans. And they answered some questions that were prompted by former Chair Bresky asking for specific, if there were any specific trends in home purchases for Newton. And the overwhelming answer from every realtor there was elementary families, which was not what I expected to hear. I just given the current sort of matriculation rates at secondary level. Secondary is where our bubble is, and we had a lot of returning students in the high schools this year. So that's their feedback. We then sent out a series of questions to every realtor in lots of different ways. We're waiting to get those pieces of information back, but very interesting. They really dug into the Thrive plan and wanted to be able to talk to families about all the pieces that were planned for the next 5 years within the system. So very interesting night, one of our best attended events this year. So I just wanted you to know. And just finally, a clarification. There's a lot of discussion about various topics at Public Speak. I just want to be clear that we are not reinstating an old program of mathematics. We are not going to tracking and to mathematics leveling as traditionally implemented in the district. It's just really important as an educator that we make sure we talk about the flexible pathways. And also, just to humble brag a little about the district, the Department of Education actually asked Newton to come and present at one of its statewide committees and workshops this past week on the Pathways program, which the Department of Ed will be endorsing as a strong model for mathematics implementation if fully implemented with its flexible pathways, on-ramps, off-ramps, and supports for struggling and advanced students. So we felt very prescient in terms of our design on the math program. And so should the math program come to pass, it's just really important for folks to know this is not the tracking program you remember from when you were in school. And I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Questions?
I did want to say one other thing. Sorry. I wanted to just say in the grants consent agenda that was just passed, there's been a lot of concern about support for key programs in the past week. And I just want folks to know that we have a never rest kind of orientation to all of the work. So grants this week included grants for financial literacy for special education program students, grants to offset unfunded U.S. history curriculum materials that were not added to this budget, a grant for supporting the mental health and well-being of newcomer and homeless students that has been authorized by the Department of Education, and a grant for comprehensive health and PE planning and curriculum writing for our pre-K to 12 educators. Thanks.
Questions? Tamika and Linda?
Thanks for the update, Anna. I heard you say that there were about 35 realtors who attended the Realtor Summit and that you sent or the team sent out a follow-up survey. Was that survey just to those 35 attendees?
We actually released it to the entire Realtor Facebook group, which has 4,000 people on it.
Cool.
Don't know who fill it out, but
Excellent. Well, that was my
Yeah.
follow-up, which
Mhm.
is, you know, unlike many groups that where you can't find their contact information, realtors
one you
tend
can.
to make themselves very findable.
Yeah.
And so surveying them broadly is definitely the way to get a.
And we
to
just
get
had an
bang for
invite to one of the local firms to speak to 120 of their agents at a staff meeting. So I think we're onto something.
Excellent. Thank you.
Linda?
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna, for the
Mm-hmm.
update. My question is in regards to the meeting with the realtors. Did you get a sense of just general momentum, and if momentum is potentially greater than where our enrollment numbers are telling us, or worse?
Yeah, we didn't get into that, but those do go to the nature of the questions that we're asking them. However, they did speak a little bit, and Dr. Roundtree was with me, about international move-ins were on the rise. So we heard a lot about a lot more international move-ins.
Thank you.
Victor?
Thank you, Dr. Owen. I think this might be very similar, or at least related to the question. So the realtor said that they're seeing more in elementaries, like what I
Mhm.
heard, right? And so this is thinking out loud here a little bit, to some extent, they're seeing more elementary movement, and I think the international component definitely factors in there. What I'm balancing that is, I guess we'll talk about a little bit later, since COVID, right, we saw that sort of about 5% jump in terms of elementary students that were going to outside of district, essentially, and that has improved a little bit. I think it's gone down a few percentage points since that point in time, but it's still high. And so what I'm thinking out loud here a little bit is, they see that they're seeing more elementary students. We're not quite seeing them yet matriculating the data. That worries me a little bit, including the fact that our property values continue to go up quite significantly. That's folks coming in but moving to private schools, right? And I think, again, this is assumptions that some of the drivers of what's happening there are related to the topics that we're discussing today, like the math perceptions, the curriculum perceptions, these things that have been discussed by the public today. So that's more, I guess, of a comment than necessarily a question per se. But I guess I'm wondering, with the international movements that they observed, was there any commentary in terms of whether, and I don't know if it got to this point, but did they ask about private schools versus public schools, or did they get to the level of
They didn't. They said that the draw for most of their clients is the schools.
Good.
So they said there's not a diminishing piece on that. The Newton School reputation is still very strong. So they weren't hearing that kind of scenario. People know about us. They come specifically to this location. And we'll share with you all of the findings from the Realtor commentary. The other piece, and Jason asked this in response to our later agenda item, so I can save it for then, but last year I interviewed all the families that left for private school over the past couple of years. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to send them the opportunity to tell us about that, so we can see if there's certain trends. Are people picking more religious schools? Are people going for athletic reasons? What we want to keep a handle on that.
Sort of exit survey-ish
Yeah.
kind of.
Yep.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Let's move on to the private school, non-public school memo. Dr. Hoag.
Hi. It's a good layup into that.
Yeah.
Hello. All right. So I am here tonight to talk about this year's private non-public school population. So the memo that you received reports on the total school age population in Newton as of January of each year. So every January we do a census of all of the private schools students who reside in the city. We collect rosters from private schools where we've had students attend in the past 3 years. We match those to our database of private school students. And then we've reached out to families of students who did not show up on the census this year and ask where their child is attending. So that is where the data in this report comes from. This report includes students who are attending NPS schools, students who are outplaced by Newton Public Schools, and then all the students are in non-NPS students who live in the city of Newton. So this year, the total school age population in the city has decreased by 1.2% compared to last year. That's the same percentage decline that we saw last January when I did this report. One of the main factors in that decline is smaller incoming kindergarten cohorts in Newton. So I know what we're hearing from realtors may seem different from that, but when we gather all this data, the kindergarten cohort each year across all types of schools is declining, and it has been declining every year since 2018 to 19. This year's kindergarten cohort was 827 students across all types of schools, compared to over 1,000 students in 2018 to 19. This January, as of this January, 22.1% of the school age population in Newton was enrolled in non-Newton public schools. So that includes private schools, private special education schools that parents may parentally place their child in. And it does include other public schools that are not Newton schools. So we do have some students who attend other public schools, likely under a parent's job as a teacher in that public school district. This is an increase of 15 students from last year's census, or an increase of 0.5%. This increase is due to an increase in the percentage of the school age population in non-MPS schools in elementary and middle school last year. At the high school level, we still have that group of students is still the highest percentage of students who are in non-MPS schools, but that percentage has declined from last year by 3.6%. At the elementary level, all of the grades saw cohort growth from the prior year. So when we're looking at students moving from one grade to the next in elementary school, all of those groups of students grew from last year. Which we think is a combination of both students who have left MPS for private school as well as new move-ins, because the cohort growth that has happened in those grade levels is larger than the number of students who left elementary grade levels from last year to this year from Newton Public Schools. At the middle school level, all 3 grade level cohorts have also grown from last year. The largest cohort growth was in grade 6, so students moving from 5th grade to 6th grade. Again, some of this is attributable to students who leave MPS for private schools. We have a long history of students who leave MPS elementary schools to go to private school and middle school. And then some of it is also due to people moving into the city and attending private school. And then at the high school level, our current grade 9 cohort grew from last year. So students moving from grade 8 to grade 9, that cohort grew by 10.4%. Last year's 8th grade class of students who were in non-MPS schools was 260 students. This year, that group of students in 9th grade is 287 students. Prior to COVID, we actually used to see cohort decline for this group of students. So students would come back to NPS in the high schools. We have seen cohort growth in this group of students since COVID happened. And then finally, the report displays the percentage of students attending non-public schools by districted school and grade level. Enrollment in non-MPS schools varies widely by districted elementary, middle, and high school level. You can take a look there in table 2. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jason?
There was a laugh after that.
I knew you'd have one.
Thank you very much for this data. I think it's really important. You know, I think just it is, first of all, there is this view of, you know, debate on the importance of this data, and I'll tell you just my personal view. I mean, I think it's really important. I celebrate the impulse to teach the students before us, but this is really important because we know also that from that 85 pages of detailed data, there's a wide range of reasons why people leave the school district, but a decent number of them we're not meeting their needs. And it's not just academics, so that's the primary one. There's a whole range of reasons why. And so I think it's really good for us to, I don't have a particular view on what rhythm, but I really celebrate what you said, Superintendent, of let's find the right rhythm to not only look at the numbers, but also hear the whys, because I think that's really important to root cause and without killing ourselves on analysis, understand what's going well and what's not. You know, I think when I was, because I looked and peeked back at the 2025 version of this, and it's really helpful how you keep it in a similar format. But I remember writing the fact that we all know there's a big increase in COVID for reasons we all know, students going outside public schools, and that's not just Newton. And it's been, I think, one to celebrate where we've seen steady progress in returning, starting with the elementary cohort, because that's where we know it's sticky. Once you leave, it's tough to come back. And so we've seen meaningful progress downwards ever since 2022, I guess, is when or 2021, when we started moving. And so this is the first year since that post-COVID timeframe where we've been making steady progress, where elementary and middle both have gone back in the other direction. And so I think that's really important. I mean, you do a very nice job of showing how it's small fractions of percentage points. I think of it as 0.6 percentage points increase for elementary, 1.1 percentage point increase. So it's natural to get in a fluctuation, and maybe we are just in a new sort of norm, but I think it bears particular import to understand what are the themes for this group of kids that are leaving, you know, because I think we're hearing lots of positives, and if there's particular themes, it would be helpful to know. That's all. Thank you.
Ben?
Thank you, Dr. Hoag. I had a question about the last page, which is the special ed students tuitioned out to non-public schools. We can see there's a trend line where the later you go in the system, the more of those students there are. I could dream up a bunch of hypotheses, or I could ask you, and it seems more likely I'll get a good answer from you.
So I am not the expert in why students are outplaced. I don't know, Dr. Nolan, if you could speak to that.
I don't know that that's a trend necessarily. It's just the particular profile of these students. We may have an earlier program that we can place in-house, and they might need to be tuitioned out, or as they become older and all the hormonal developmental pieces kick in, they become needing a more intensive program. Those can be some of the reasons. I can specifically ask Casey No-Miller for an analysis of that, but my sense is it's that they age out of programs that we have and need more service than the district has.
Yeah, so that makes sense. That was one of the things I was wondering about, and it would also make me wonder, should we have other programs? Are there other doors we could open in high school, like some of the doors we've opened in elementary school in the last few years? Or, you know, maybe there's a story where because we've opened more in elementary schools, people are feeling more comfortable starting in the system, settling in the system, and staying in the system, and that would be a really good story to celebrate. And I think I didn't think like Jason to go open up the old reports, but maybe if we look backwards, we can see if this pattern has always held, or if this is something new, but I think it's an obvious pattern, so I'd love to understand a little bit better.
I can tell you that typically the number of students who are outplaced increases as the grade level increases. So we typically don't have very many elementary age students who are outplaced, and it increases in middle and high school. And the numbers that you see here are pretty typical over the past, I've been here 12 years. This is pretty similar for the past 12 times I've done this report.
It does also comport with special education requirements. So we have to exhaust every least restrictive environment in order for a student to be eligible for an out-of-district placement. So that does take some time. I guess I also want to say, you know, we never rest on that analysis of should we be putting another program in or not. So you heard some discussion here related to mental health services tonight. Liam, Hurley, and I we're on our almost third meeting with a university partner to consider alternative high school programming that allows for credit recovery, step in, step out, for hospitalization, those types of programs, which many school systems have. And It seems that some combination of Harbor and Springboard were something like that, but we would like something more formal. So we are exploring those options always, and we would come to you with the cost benefit analysis of those types of programs.
Great, thank you.
Tamika? Thanks, Alicia. So Katie, thanks for the report. I appreciate having the data. I just want to offer a gentle perspective change on, Jason, your phrasing about that there's a group of or percentage of Newton residents that for whom Newton Public Schools isn't meeting their needs. If I could offer a slight shift of narrative on that, I would encourage us to think of it as that there is a percentage of Newton residents for whom the public schools are not their desired provider of education for various reasons. And I think it's important to keep that frame in mind that as a public school, we have obligations beyond any private school. We have obligations to provide special education services, and we don't turn anyone away. We open our doors and we welcome everybody in, and we hold them in kind. That's huge part of the public school experience. And so for various families, for various reasons, this is not something that is as desired as it may be for each of us and our students and our families. So I just want to correct that. There's athletic reasons, there's, cultural reasons, there's people coming in from different states or different countries who just have different needs around education that, and so some of those things we can certainly compete on a level playing field. Academics, I would say we can compete there, but there are other areas where we can't, nor do we want to compete, because like I said, we're welcoming and inclusive of everyone. So just want to put that out there.
Thank you. I very much agree with the characterization that, the goal is not to sort of form fit with what we see as outside. And I thought the report last year did a really nice job of sharing just as Tamika, you said, the very wide range of reasons why people do that. As you said, it's sports, it's religion, for some people it is academics, it's dyslexia support. I mean, it was all there. And so I very much agree with you. What's beautiful about public schools is we try to do it all, and that comes with, in my opinion, I think this is in line with what you're describing, like huge pros for everyone, for the kids, for our communities. And so it was not my intention to suggest that if someone's unhappy, then we need to go fix that particular problem. But I do think the profile of the needs and how they're shifting and what may drive a trend could be useful input, was my suggestion. Thanks.
Linda?
Thank you so much for the analysis. Really appreciate it. And one thing I realized when I saw grade 6, I had it confused. I thought it was after grade 6. So I appreciate the clarification. It makes more sense now. I guess the question I have is for you, Anna, and that is, I'm sure historically that is always the biggest jump from grade 5 to grade 6. So, and I know we put a lot of attention on that transition, but should we put even more focus on it for our families? So maybe that NPS could serve their needs, but they are uninformed or.
Yeah, so as a longtime middle school educator and principal, I take umbrage with everyone leaving in middle school. But it's a common thing, not just in our district. And one of the discussion points that we've been having as a principal group is, do we have some overview days before people get there, before they get to that point where they're heading to the transition to grade 6, to let people know what are their middle schools like? How snuggly are they? How can you get cared for there? Those kind of breaking down those middle school stereotypes. We had intended this year with the feeder pattern, how do I know how my kid's doing sessions, just to have the principals were there, the middle school principals, we were going to start snuggling up everyone. No one came. So we got to rethink it. And because obviously we didn't get it right. But that was the idea, was we were going to start to have these kinds of activities so that people could get to know their middle schoolers. Maybe they'd meet some other parents. So there are things we can do to try to beef that up. When we've been talking about the policy committee about homework, one of our administrative interns has been doing some policy research for us and polling all our principals. A lot of families and principals are worried about the 5 to 6 transition in terms of study skills and what homework feels like it's scary to people. So that's in the mix too. When we talk to parents, they're like, is my kid really ready for middle school? Do they need a smaller environment, something different? So parents who have options may be choosing that option. So, but those are ageless, time-old middle school problems that I encourage everyone to reject.
I think, I know for me, when my eldest went to middle school, the biggest thing that I was worried about, no after-school program. And it, once you've been through it, you realize they're going to be fine. But I feel like there's a huge population who attends the after-school programs, and some sort of education on how does
happens
yeah
after school. Yeah. The family engagement director and I have been talking about a program that we both participated in the past called the Power Parent Program, the Triple P. And what happens is we identify parents at each level. You sound like you might be a good candidate for this, because although you're probably all Triple P parents right now, just that you are that person who's advertised as, are you worried about the transition to blank? Well, this person is identified for your school to answer questions and do that. It's sort of what CPAC and LPAC do for parents. But they're known and trained, and we give them resources to talk to families, because it is really that personal connection of you saying, no, my kid was fine at day. Here's what they did. Here are the ropes. We want that for all our families.
I love it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Oh.
go ahead.
I just want to chime in on this one very briefly, because I really, it also, the numbers attract the eye. And of course, because of a number of different things, the stage that you mentioned and the prevalence of the number of schools and what the makeup are, it is a natural point for there to be more of a drop off into private school. One thing that I was thinking about when you were describing that is there actually is a little bit of an information asymmetry for the parents who are thinking about it.
That's right.
And I experienced that, where you're on the playground with your second grader and you learn of, your other parent has a second grader, has a fifth grader, and they're leaving, and you want to know why. And they've just come from an X or Y or Z tour, and I think at some early point, wedged myself into one of, and we've talked about this, Tamika, one of Principal Mann's fantastic, but I was the weirdo with no middle school kids and join the.
Yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about that.
Yeah, no. But I actually really do think we should think about ways to give people a taste of the cooking, because it was a fantastic experience that I had, and I learned a lot. So, sorry, random rumination.
Helpful. Right. More questions on that? Thank you, Dr. Hoag. Thank you, Katie. We will move to a first read of the bullying prevention and intervention policy, part 1.
Is Jill here or online? Okay. Okay. So this is Tracy Sokolowski. She is our Director of Humanities, Health, Wellness, and World Language and Physical Education. And Jill Murray Grady, General Counsel.
Good evening. So you met, Tracy helped a lot. She's overseeing a lot of the changes and everything regarding the curriculum piece. Sorry. So I thought if there were any questions related to that she would be a helpful resource to be here at the table with me. As you know, I bring these policies before you periodically. This one is very specific in particular in the statutory requirements, in that, all districts are required to have this quote unquote, I say quote unquote policy because it says policy, but it has turned into largely policy and plan or protocol or whatever districts want to call the meat of their document. And one of the requirements in the statute, it's very explicit, is school districts are required to review it every 2 years. It's not very it's unclear what type of review and who exactly needs to review it. But here in Jason agrees. Here in Newton, we've taken the position that we do it internally and bring it before the school committee because every policy needs to go to the school committee. But the plan in and of itself is more the implementation working document, like many of our other protocols, which I shared with you what the current existing was. I'm sorry, the revised one is right now. But I think the bigger story tonight is that with this policy, while we review it every 2 years internally and bring it before the school committee, the policy, and then we tweak the plan, usually with administrators and some internal stakeholders, is we feel it's high time to have a bigger holistic review of the bullying plan. The policy in and of itself is quite prescribed by the statute and hasn't changed. So I don't expect, I just did a little wordsmithing here. You can see where the changes are. There's really nothing of substance. The meat of it is in what we call this plan. This needs to be reviewed internally every few years. Things change with curriculum. Some of the investigation procedures and documentation will tweak based on input and the way things have happened. But as I set forth in the memo, in this review process, it was decided that in order to be in compliance with the law, there has to be a review every 2 years. The last review in policy was adopted in April 2024, so it needed to be done by now. So we did the typical not very substantive review and changes, but with the plan of having a much bigger, almost what I dubbed phase 2 process of having significantly more and varied stakeholders to come to the table to have a more global review, because that's what the intention of this was back in 2010 or 2011. But I don't think it's feasible, viable, or required in common practice for districts to do that every 2 years, but it's been a while. And so that's kind of where we are. So tonight, what's before you is the revised policy for a first read for a vote in the next meeting. We provided the revised plan for you just so you have that, since that's largely where most of the stuff lives. The school committee does not vote on the plan itself, but certainly open to questions, comments, suggestions, requests, with the understanding that the big meat of this is going to be back before you in the fall when there's much more to be discussed and changed. And then the memo as well. So here to answer any questions. I don't know, Tracy, did I hit all the high points?
Sure, except for I like to call it the bullying prevention and intervention plan instead of the bullying plan. We're really not. We try to not plan bullying, but small change.
Good addition.
Important clarification. Thank you.
It's important. It's important how you frame things.
All right, Mayor Laredo?
So thank you. First of all, this is actually, I think, very important work. The policies changes are minor, as you said. They're really some wordsmithing. As far as the plan goes, obviously that's your prerogative as a district, as an administration, not our role. Are there any significant changes in the plan from what we had previously that you'd want to highlight for us?
Sure. It was largely around the goal. I just want to also thank, we had a small internal committee, so we did get input from a few different administrators at different levels, as well as Tracy's department, as well, and the MTSS, Jesse and Sophia. Largely what we were looking forward to do at this point, given the timeline and the scope of this review, was to ensure that this was accurate, largely with the what curriculum was and was not being done. There were some specifics in here that things have changed. And so we had to change that to make sure it wasn't inaccurate, with the understanding that there's still a lot of work to be done there. That seems to be a bulk of what the second phase is likely going to address. In terms of the process piece, investigation, not much. I think we tweaked some language to be just a little less specific in some of the potential outcomes, so that folks don't get the idea that if they can get a particular outcome, if there is a bullying finding, because it's all very individualized, student-centered, and how that's administered on the ground. And that was largely it. And then the big one, I think, for me is after the last one was approved, Maura Morse, who's now principal, but at the time was she was a 0.5 something else and something else, and she did a huge favor, and she digitized and made a Google form, which the links are at the back now, where it used to be just this old like photograph form of a bullying complaint form, which doesn't make sense. And the Google form also allows now for actual real data collection, now that we know that what DESE wants for that data collection, and Katie Hogue helps with that as well.
May I just follow up? So I think what you're saying is you have work to do on, it's good that you made the plan complementary to what you're actually doing, but it sounds like in a number of months, you may have some changes to the plan that are coming forward.
If I could just speak to that, in all good, strong curriculum, there should be consistent review and evaluation if the curriculum is meeting the needs of the times, and it hasn't been a chance for us to go back and do a proper curriculum review on the curriculum that's being used, and that is what we intend to do.
So when do you expect that work is going to be completed?
I think it depends on the process with the stakeholders. There's been requests and suggestion to broaden that to many community members. We want students. So I think I was envisioning early to mid-fall, just given the summer, but we're going to, once this is done, the goal is to create that second phase committee and launch it certainly before the end of the school year, and have it planned out so that there's enough meetings and input and time so that this will be done soon after the beginning of the school year.
So if I could just ask the chair and the superintendent, it'd be great, once the work is completed, and I realize it's going to take time, it'd be great to get a report or an update on what they've done.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll bring it back to you.
Mika?
Thanks, Alicia. And thank you both for the updates and the work that you're committing to going forward. I have a couple of questions. One, Jill, you actually teed up for me when you mentioned the 0.5 Maura Morse contribution to this in the first go-round. That was under, and I believe, you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was while Maura Morse was 0.5 DEI assistant. And so the teed up question, therefore, is, has the DEI director been involved in this iteration in order to help make sure that there's common overlap? There's a lot of, sorry, let me back up. There is a lot of overlap with this policy and the anti-harassment, discrimination, retaliation policy. And so it does make sense for those to be taken as part of a comprehensive overlook. So was that done? And if so, why not?
I mean, answering your question, there seems to have been a clear delineation between that office and that protocol and this one in terms of who's overseeing it and implementing it and making decisions and investigations. That being said, their insight has always been sought when doing these committees in the process.
And as you said, it in fact fed into the revision the last go round.
I believe more said, I'm not sure exactly where she was in her process. It might have been when she was about to be principal. I don't recall, because if you recall, she was also the principal of DLA. And like she's worn many hats and has worn them very well. And so I just don't remember. It could have been very much so. But this is not really within the governance of the DEI office.
Gotcha.
It is separate in that sense. That being said, they do often dovetail and go in, and when we do the trainings of the administrators, we do them both, because many things, if you do a Venn diagram, could potentially fall under both. And we want to make sure we're proceeding under the right one for the investigation procedures. But yes, it's always, and if you see here in the plan, we always reference back to the non-discrimination policy as well.
Yes.
That's what I was going to say. I do want to say, remember, one of the first activities we all did together was made a flow chart of who's responsible for what and how are they different, because they are different. Principals are generally in charge of this area.
So that feeds into my next question, which is about the implementation phase. You're not there yet, but I imagine there's going to be a fair amount of training on helping guide the principals who are primarily responsible for implementing the DEI policy and the protocols, or not DEI, the anti-bullying, the bullying prevention policy. And so as you look to schedule or ensure that that training is really instructive and comprehensive, how are you going to go about doing that? Because, you know, it's one area where there can be a lot of issues that flow from
Yeah.
failure to observe certain timelines. And
Yeah,
pro-
I
and the
think I can,
protocols.
I think I can answer that. Yeah. Pretty straightforward. I don't foresee a lot of changes in the process, in the investigation process. But I really see the changes being, and again, we need input from stakeholders, parents, CPAC, LPAC, students, is largely in the responses. In terms of the responses and then the curriculum and the teaching, those pieces, right? The SEL pieces, and then how their responses to it. In terms of the straight up process of investigations, I do trainings every year with the principals and APs throughout the year on the bullying. I have a database for everyone with steps. So this is something that comes up. That's not to say that people haven't misstepped, and so we periodically have to do reminders, but it is something that depending on what we're doing, if it's the non-discrimination, Kathy Lopes does it with me. If it's HR related employee, Joannie does it as well, but I kind of spearhead that, and we plan it out in a retreat in the summer to make sure everyone's getting trained at before school year starts, when the school year starts, and so forth.
But I would also say that Dr. Feierig and Dr. Roundtree are the boots on the ground there. So they are the closest to principals, and mostly, you know, it's a loop between Jill and the assistant superintendents with the principal.
And the hope is with the implementation of strong anti-bullying curriculum, we're proactive and therefore would have far fewer things to respond to.
I love that hope.
Well, and one more thing just to dovetail on that is there is likely going to be some impact on the training, like the staff training. We're not sure what yet, but this is all part of it, which gets to your point, which is like knowing what you're seeing that you then need to activate, you know, something.
And my last one is just, it's a little nitpicky. Can you talk about the decision to strike the word comfort from the policy? Comfort, and perhaps insert belonging in its place?
Oh, that was it.
And the reason I'm asking is because comfort does capture something of the physical.
Oh, Sophia did. Yeah.
Of the physical characteristic, or, you know, so why not comfort?
This was input from Sophia, who lives in this world of social emotional, like she's an expert.
Yeah.
And she just thought that belonging seemed more of an appropriate term.
So I agree that belonging is an appropriate term to
We
be
could keep them
there.
both.
But I would suggest that keeping comfort is important, because I can envision a few scenarios where someone's comfort in their personal or physical space is a form of bullying. And so you allude to that in your very first example, but I think inserting it in the words of the policy itself as one of the formative things that we're seeking to avoid is important, rather than just as an example.
Yeah, I mean, if that, we can leave it in. Great.
That would be my feedback. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. I agree with Mayor Laredo. This is super important. We talked about this a little bit offline, but I thought it was an important nuance that the public in the room here as well is what I was curious about is how does this apply or not apply to caregivers who may be attending an event, a meeting, so forth, and it could be caregiver to caregiver, caregiver to educator, or caregiver to student. How does this apply or not apply?
So according to the law, bullying is between two students. So that would be discrimination, I believe. I can't speak to the.
I mean, I think, as I kind of see it as, yes, there's certain things that fall within here. It's very prescribed, hasn't been looked at since it got passed, right? The law. But it is part of our, like, you know, moral and ethical code or what have you, values I'm sorry, I'm not feeling 100% of my brain.
You're doing fine, Jill.
Of the district that we expect people to follow. So our ability, our enforcement of it is a little bit nuanced when we're not talking about staff or students, right? We can discipline or require a student to do a training or to do some sort of action, and same with an employee. When you have, a spectator at a game, whether that's a parent or something else. However, the jurisdiction of this policy does extend to those things. So what unfortunately has happened a few times, but not a ton that I know of, is a parent may do something or another student do something at an event, and that gets reported. And while it may or may not constitute bullying, the jurisdiction over that person, we can't discipline them, we can't fire them, but we can say, if you do this again, you can't come back. You're not allowed in, or you're not allowed in because you did something, or, who else needs to be involved? Is it a police matter? So it is and it isn't enforceable to non-students and staff in that way.
Thank you.
Victor and Ben.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I would just say two quick comments. And thanks again, obviously, came from our committee, so I appreciate it. So with all respect to my colleague, Ms. Olszewski, I have slight difference of opinion on the comfort thing. I get where you're coming from. I think there's a lot of value to that. My maybe pedantic concern is that there's some instances in which learning can be productively uncomfortable, and I think there's a distinction between that versus belonging versus safety. So I hear you. Like, we don't want folks to be unfairly uncomfortable in I think situations that we're aiming for, but I do worry a little bit about whether that opens up to, I mean, you guys are the lawyers, not I, but I do worry a little bit that if you introduce comfort as a concept, you might start to go into kind of hazier, softer ground that could be. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I refer to comfort less in its emotional capacity and more in its physical one. So
Understood, okay.
someone's physical comfort
Got it.
could be a form of bullying, impeding or interacting with someone's physical comfort.
Got it. Okay. Taken under advisement. I think part of it is also where that bridges into safety as well. But your point is well taken. The other side comment is, I think just as important as this particular initiative, or this particular change, I should say, is going to be getting ahead of the instances that arise to bullying prevention. And though this is going to be a later conversation, in my personal opinion, things around a fuller rollout of the anti-ableism curriculum will eventually have to come into play. There's so many things we have to do that arguably take equal, if not greater, precedence. So I understand this is not going to be necessarily like priority one, but I do know there's members of our community for whom those and similar type initiatives will be very important, so that we get ahead of it before the bullying becomes a larger issue. So just food for thought for the future. Thank you.
I do just want to distinguish that there is a difference between the required bullying training and curriculum and what you're talking about, which is cuts to our core values around empathy, perspective taking, like all of those pieces, and understanding, different types of individuals. So one of the reasons we hired Tracy is that she's really good at doing that kind of curriculum work. And we're looking at all our health standards, the media literacy standards, all of these are kind of knitted together, the anti-ableism work, all of it is knitted together in the K-12 continuum. And that is, like, if there's a theme to our work, it's the coherence of the curriculum and having a K-12 vertical, sensible plan for all of this to be executed.
Thank you.
Ben?
Thank you. Jill, it does say bullying's repeated use by one or more students or staff members. Like, I read this as applying to staff and our educators.
It did, yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, I think that we got to be really specific on the physical comfort issue. I think we should say physical comfort, because if I'm a teacher, I don't want a student to say, my teacher is making me uncomfortable by asking me hard questions every day, to Victor's point. Right. So I think there's a specific concern that's valid, and there is a broader interpretation that could be challenging for our educators to deal with. So if we refine that, I'd like to try to be narrow in how we do that.
I think that was Sophia's point when she pointed it out. I think that comfort seems, it could take many different positions, right? And like, when we're talking about physical comfort, in my legal mind, I think safety, right? I feel safe here. But this is not I'm here to help like put it all together in a way that makes sense so that it's clear. So I just want to make sure I understand what I'm changing. So do
Sounds
you want me
like
to put
physical
physical comfort back in? Okay.
Feels good to you?
Sure.
Okay.
Right, any other questions? No? All right. And so just for the public, so we will bring this up again at the next meeting and we will vote on these small changes. And then we will kick off phase 2, which will include community stakeholders, other groups. I think whatever your small subgroup that did the initial work will probably just get expanded more
It'll grow.
broadly. Yeah. Awesome.
Good.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Shall we vote on the last day of school?
Yes, we shall.
I'm sure there's no more snow.
Don't even say that
Everyone
out
knock on wood right now.
Biggest snowstorm of my childhood was April 1st.
Yeah, 1996.
loud. You guys, you're.
Okay, so the memo before the school committee tonight asks for us to vote the end of the year, the last day of school. We had 4 snow days this winter, January 26, 27, and February 23, 24. I have officially broken my streak of being the least canceling superintendent in the Commonwealth. K to 12 students and teachers, their last day would be Thursday, June 25th for students, and for teachers, it would be June 26th. NECP students and teachers, the last day would be Wednesday, June 24th for students, and Friday, June 26th for teachers. So I ask you to support this, and if we have a snowstorm, I'll be back here asking to vote another day.
Question? No? Okay. Tamika?
Yes, well, not exactly a question. I'm going to insert something and I can see the inbox filling up with hate mail already. So I'm tempted to not insert it, but I mean, it's been several years now where we're pushing the last week of June school closures. And it occurs to me that as we are looking to be more culturally responsive and add additional holidays, and we are snow daying our way into, very hot territory towards the end of the year where, quite frankly, I don't imagine a lot of deep learning is happening. This is the hateful part. I think it would be prudent of us to take a look at some of those week-long times outside of school. February break comes to mind. I know the skiers out there cherish this time, but I think we should start thinking about whether we can use those days and what that process might look like and what that additional time on learning would allow us to be able to do. Hate mail sent here. Yeah.
Anybody else want to touch that? No, Jonathan?
Who else wants the hate mail?
I just have questions. What of that is regulated by the state, or is that something that we as a district ordain?
You can decide it. I'll let you know that in my former district, we did that experiment for 2 years.
Yep.
Feb break was supposed to be a buffer during flu season. And that was exactly what happened. We had massive outages of kids. It breaks the cycle of illness. That said, you can do whatever you like and you control the calendar.
Got it. And what of that would trip a contractual obligation with our various unions? Like, is that, would we have to go negotiate for all of those things, or that's only the start date?
Nope.
No.
The calendar, our contract says that we will share and be collaborative with our unions, which we do, in seeking feedback. And there are start of school parameters and end of school parameters in the contract, but it does not dictate the weeks.
I will offer to Tamika's hate mail writers that I have offered no opinion here. I have only asked questions.
It's very courageous.
Not really.
I will spread the attack, I suppose. The only thing I would add, well, there is the physical health element, which I'm very glad you raised, Dr. Nolan. There's also arguably the mental health component of it too, of having enough of a break in between. I think it's worth investigating for sure. If it becomes where you're taking away all 5 days, that might get a little spicy. As much as I do like spicy food, that's a little bit more for the day. Yeah, I just worry a little bit about. It's not so much the who goes off to whatever Vail or wherever the place is that they want to go ski, but it's more about, I think,
Rest.
just having a good cadence. Yeah, having kids have the opportunity to kind of just reset themselves and come back. So again, I think there's a fine line balance. Maybe again, I'm throwing this idea out here off the top of my noggin, but maybe there's sort of a cap on how many of those days you even consider within the week, so that you're not exceeding maybe two days or something like that. Over time.
Linda?
Actually, I think it's a pretty intriguing idea. I don't necessarily know how I feel about it, but I'm glad you brought it up.
The other here.
Yeah, no, I'm curious, Anna, do we have any data? Do any other school systems, like I've never heard of a public school system in Massachusetts that doesn't follow the February.
I can certainly ask. Yep.
I mean, I think it would be interesting to look at potential different models that maybe wouldn't create all the hate mail. Like, is it a 4-day weekend in February and or I don't know, I'm making that up. Maybe it's the regular, it's 3 days and then there's a little longer break in March and no April. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but it is a really good point because it's really hard for the kids come mid to late June.
All right. You want one more?
I guess the other theoretical thing, which I don't recommend, is I believe you can request from DESE a waiver if you really needed to, but we think we want the 180 days of core learning. So that's the other, in the worst case scenario, I guess you could do it on the one-off basis. I think Fall River just made that request not long ago. So there are options, but
Yeah,
you just want to be very careful before you do
You have to expended your 5 days of snow already, and so those are like for emergency snow type. Yeah.
Do you want us to vote this now, or is this a first read? We're going to vote it.
Yes, please vote it because the elementary principals need to set their last day of school promotion plans. And this, if you want hate mail, we'll just keep on the hate mail train. We need to get that nailed down, right, Aisha?
I'll make the motion.
Yep.
Motion. Oh, Ben, go ahead.
So just to be clear, you said this before, if there is a heat day, right, which I think we had a couple years ago, it was 102 and so school, then we can just come back and vote another day on to the end of the school year. And that creates some logistical chaos, but we can do it. It's
right.
Okay, got it. Good, thank you.
Is there a motion to approve the last day of school? Victor? Second? Linda? All right, let's vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes, and I love February break.
I don't know about that. Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7 is a yes. Ward 8?
Yes.
Mayor Laredo?
Yes.
All right, last day of school passes. Okay. So our final discussion item for the evening is budget review and potential vote. I don't know, the superintendent, do you want to kick anything off or would you like us to just begin deliberation?
I think you should just start. I had Stephen bring up our last
In case anybody
resource
wants to
if people need it.
refer to a slide. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
I will. Thanks for being there.
We'll start with Jonathan and Victor.
Thank you. I want to say a couple of things, so I'll just sort of jump into it here. I'd like to start by reiterating my appreciation and respect for the NPS teachers and staff who have watched this process play out in public. As I said a couple of weeks ago, I cannot imagine watching as the future of my job is debated in a public hearing over multiple months. That is incredibly difficult, and whatever it is that you do for the schools, no matter the budget adopted, you personally are valued and your contributions to Newton, NPS, and our community are appreciated. To the members of the community, especially the students who have taken time to write to us, to appear here in public comment, or to share your experiences with the schools, reflect on the priorities for NPS, and remind us of how and why you voted in the election last year. Thank you. Your input is heard, it too is valued, and your decision to participate in the process is a credit to the community and the children that NPS serves. To the handful of people who have come to hurl insults at committee members, chide this committee for not valuing a particularly important priority to you, or to use the budget process as a marketing exercise for a consulting business, that is your right. But I ask that you consider the example you've set for students in an age of painfully dysfunctional national politics, and whether there was, in the end, a better way. This budget process, from my point of view, should have been an unmitigated win for everyone. The mayor engaged early on the needs of the schools, reflecting his campaign promise to make NPS a priority. He reset the funding baseline appropriately to reflect the money that the schools have received from the city without the one-time item games that have plagued past processes. Beyond the baseline adjustment, he has offered a significant year-on-year step-up in funding and alluded several times to the work that City Hall is pursuing to manage the pension obligations that put so much strain on city finances. All of these were asks and solutions championed by people committed to the schools. The budget subcommittee worked early with the superintendent to set priorities, and the superintendent has worked tirelessly to bring an almost entirely new school committee up to speed on NPS's finances. Unfortunately, this hasn't felt like an unmitigated win for everyone. With healthcare, utilities, and contract wage growth alone driving over 5 percentage points of cost growth from this year, what remains does not go very far, as Dr. Nolan has illustrated consistently with her seesaw slide. While creative and passionate, the ideas for raising additional funding through philanthropy, sponsorships, school choice, legislative earmarks, and tax overrides are not fixes that I believe we can count on in planning for 2027 programs and services. It has also felt unpleasant for many, including myself, because it has felt somewhat out of sequence. True or not, it feels like the city's determination of the 27 allocation was set before this group, including the mayor, had the opportunity to understand the trade-offs imposed through the allocation, not just for NPS, but for the city at large. As I said a few weeks ago, I believe an allocation is a hard thing for voters and parents to have a point of view on. Explaining to voters what is needed to fund investments in math or sustainability versus the need to fill 10 open police officer positions and to fund the epic snow removal process from this winter are trade-offs that, in my opinion, are much easier to engage on and understand. I would also respectfully submit that the assertions that these inflationary pressures are surprises isn't terribly credible. The contract is the contract. Healthcare and utilities have been trending for many quarters, and the superintendent has been clear that the cost of the substitutes has been contract substitutes was under budgeted from the beginning as part of a complex negotiation of prior processes. The promise of getting us from net to gross budget framework also remains partially unfulfilled. What's called out in the paragraph or two in the budget book, while it is called out in a paragraph or two in the budget book, it is still framed, the budget is still framed as a net budget. And I would guess that few observing this process really understand that the total services from NPS next year will cost closer to $340 million than the $317 or $314 once all of the other sources of funds are accounted for. That will continue to hamper voters' ability to understand the impacts of potential future changes in state and federal funding in the years to come, which I believe we are certain to see. I think the mayor's suggestion that we begin next year's budget process early as this summer is a good one, and I look forward to participating fully in that. It is crucial that we chart a course not just for 2028, but for the capacity to invest in the program improvements that parents and voters have made so clear that they demand and that we know our children clearly deserve. Fixing this will require more than a hasty override proposal or trimming on the margins. If we are arguing about shuffling $100,000 from here to there, we will have missed the point. If we fail to engage deeply, not just on revenue, but also some of the drivers of consistent cost growth, one-on-one aides, out-of-district placement tuition, teacher absence costs, both monetary and educational, we will struggle to justify an override to the community. Finally, we need to plan for a 28 that does not depend on robbing promised services from 27 to fund another carry forward. Turning to the choice ahead of us, I believe for many reasons that it is critical that we fund the improvements to the math program that Dr. Nolan has proposed. I'm sorry that Ms. Montag was not able to stay for the remainder of the meeting, because I believe that first and foremost, the math investment is actually a question of social justice. Not just because it is the mechanism for providing the support needed to help close the achievement gap for students that are disproportionately from disadvantaged backgrounds, but also because it is the right thing for our advanced students who are ready for more challenging material, and your family's ability to pay for outside math courses should not govern the education that you get in the city of Newton. It is also the only investment that we have discussed that has the potential to help bend the cost curve in the years to come by ensuring kids are learning in the classroom with their peers and teachers before they require an IEP. While difficult, I also do not share the opinion that this year's budget proposals are something to be ashamed of. Funding for NPS may have grown more slowly the last couple of years than our peer districts, but we aren't off the map on dollars per student spent. Our peer districts are clearly struggling with the same cost pressures that we are, and the mayor has started the work of correcting the structural deficit with his significant proposed year-on-year increase in funding. I also don't think there is any shame in choosing to prioritize investments in math over pace of progress on things like electric school buses. This is not because sustainability isn't objectively important, but because it is not more important than math. And the payoff on the investment in math is relatively more clear than many of the others. As I tried to highlight last week, there are obviously some real cuts in the current proposal needed to accommodate both the budget reality and this committee's priorities. For the staff and the families impacted by the reductions, those cuts are very real. But $500,000 of the $100,000 of the reductions are directly tied to falling student enrollment. $1 million of what we've framed as cuts is really new sources of revenue, more than half of which comes from the city. And the remainder is largely us, as a city, making Dr. Nolan's job harder than it should be by reducing the flexibility that she needs to manage an organization of this scale. Thank you, and I am sorry. It is, however, a plan that she and her team have put forward to meet the current challenge, and there is no one that I would rather have guiding our kids' educations in this moment than Dr. Nolan and our exceptional educators. With that, I would like to move that the school committee approve the FY 2027 budget consistent with the mayor's allocation of $314,574,126 and the Path B proposal from the superintendent, which includes sufficient resources to ensure full implementation of the middle school math MTSS and the Math Pathways program, and submit that budget to the City Council for approval.
Anyone like to second? I'll second. We have a motion to approve the allocation at 314.5. I'll add the rest of the numbers as we go through with the Path B superintendent inclusive of math. We can open it for discussion. Victor?
For discussion, yeah. Thank you. Well, first, big compliment to my colleague here for his eloquence. I'm not sure I'm going to match that degree tonight, but I do want to. That might be long too, so I don't know. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who came out and who's spoken to us both directly, maybe through email, through personal contacts, through phone conversations. It's very edifying and also very good. I mean, that is, ultimately one of our core responsibilities is to understand and listen to our fellow neighbors and constituents. There were a few things I think that were articulated tonight that I just wanted to first address, and some of them honestly might have been partly my own trouble doing in prior school committee meetings. Regarding the math pathways in no particular order, I think there was one comment that represented a misperception of what math pathways is about. It is about helping students for whom the current level of math challenge is not sufficient. And those are very vocal people, I think, in our community, to be very clear. But equally important, if not more important, is the called 30% roughly of students who are not necessarily meeting the proficiency levels right now. And the math pathways is just as much to help those folks who need an additional push as much as to help those who need to get up to where we know they can get. And so I think it's very important to recognize that when we talk about the math pathways, we're not just talking about, oh, how does somebody who's capable of doing 9th grade math material right now get that option when they're in 8th grade? That is important, but it's also making sure that whether it's through summer school, whether it's through wind block activities or some other kind of solution, we are able to get those kids up to standard. And that's super important. It will come through the interventionists that we are proposing as a result of a Plan B type option. It will come hopefully again through some of these summer school efforts. Now, to be clear to the community, if we're going to provide these things like summer school, we need to make sure that folks are actually showing up, right? This is important. We're going to provide the opportunities. It's going to be incumbent upon our neighbors to make sure that they take full advantage of that resource. That's the only way through partnership we're going to get any kind of proceeding going on. But I don't want it to be perceived as simply just accelerating for a small set of the community. And again, even while we're not necessarily doing a political poll count of things, I will say that there's been many, many folks who have reached out to us on all of the very critical issues. Math is probably the most common element. And I would say it's also the academic subject that, as one other commenter said before, comes down to, in my opinion, the most fundamental aspects of education. Reading, the 3 R's, right? Reading, writing, and good old arithmetic. It should also be mentioned, I think, that there are other districts that are out there, peer districts, that have been able to implement math pathways. In fact, I think Dr. Nolan said that we're one of the last ones that's still out there, if memory serves. And yet they are still able to manage the mental health crisis. I mean, nobody wants to go back to I still remember the days of 2014 and some other concerns that arose even in subsequent years. But there is a path, I think, to both increase our math performance while also being able to help our students learn how to deal with challenges that are going to present themselves not just in K-12, but in years beyond that. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to address. That was a bit long-winded. There was another comment, I think, that we are cutting DEI to fund math. And I just want to clarify my particular perspective on that, because I think that's not a correct understanding of it. And I did know at one point I sort of rhetorically said that it's math at what cost. So to clarify that from my perspective, the plans that we have out there are Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, right? Plan A is the mayor's allocation, no math, but it requires the painful cuts of many key folks in central administration, a decision I know Dr. Nolan does not enjoy making, but one that was necessary in order to make the level of allocation that was given. Plan B is like Plan A, but provides for the math. I know you folks know this, but I'm saying this for the community as well, through other mechanisms beyond that. In both of those situations, we would have to face these unpleasant staffing changes. There's also Plan C, which would be, as we sort of said, an alternative. Personally, I would like to see a Plan C. I would much rather see I want to keep math, and I still firmly believe that while I understand the mayor's perspective that we don't want to use one-time funding for recurring purposes, I still firmly believe the Education Stabilization Fund, as some other folks have said before, is one of these cases where we would make an exception for maybe 1 year to buy us time to do all the things that we do want to do, but we'll take many years to do that. And if we decide as tonight, as I suspect, that that's not a viable option, that it's going to be Plan B, which I would then support, I want to be clear that if we do this, we should be starting the conversation around what it takes to do things like an override or other kind of initiatives, because it's going to take, in my opinion, at least a year, if not longer, to do this. And I think we can both demonstrate to the public that we are being fiscally responsible and start the communication at the same time. And again, whether that actually plays out in a year or 2 years, I don't know. But if we wait too long, we're just going to be literally in the same position again in 11 to 12 months. I regret that we're here in this particular position, but I do want to, again, stick with the facts. I think the facts are important to recognize that the mayor did give a historic allocation. That's a fact that should be celebrated. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Green here, that this is indeed something that is distinctive. It is also a fact, one could argue, that that is not sufficient in order to be able to maintain the existing central administration office as we are. I'm thankful, I'm grateful, and I'm proud that we were able to push a little bit and get some redirection of things like shout out to Representative Lon for his 200,000 K, right? We're able to cover some of the ABA services that are out there, not all of them, but at least a directional element there. I don't like this idea that we have to, get rid of a sustainability director, that we have to get rid of a DI or cut a DI position down by a half, that we have to put at risk some of the ABA services. But I also recognize that, on the other hand, I'm not necessarily comfortable either setting up a budget knowing that there's no allocation that matches that, and then finding ourselves having to chase that money down, down the road. Either way, we're going to chase that money, right? I think the question is whether it's Plan B or some other Plan C that goes forward tonight or some future time. Well, I guess there will be a vote on it, so we'll know soon. My hope and call to action is, regardless of what happens tonight, I hope we've got enough people to sort of understand the frustration point with where this is and the need for us as a community to use this sort of driver of interest, driver of awareness, driver of concern to build on that and spread that knowledge. I keep saying the same thing because I really believe in it. Each person, the ability to share their concerns about why they believe the budget may not be enough at this particular moment in time should be something that they relay to the next 3 neighbors, and those neighbors will compound and gradually get that storyline so that we are able to build up that communication again over time. I've somewhat resigned myself to the possibility that Plan B might be the most viable solution here. Quite frankly, I don't think there is, with all due respect to our city councilors, friends there, I don't know if there is the political will to necessarily push back the same way that that was done with our prior mayor. And it was, in a very different circumstance. I think to Mayor Laredo's credit, he did recognize the base at a different, more realistic rate than other predecessors did, right? So that should be acknowledged. So I'll just, I'll conclude by wrapping up that, I regret that we're in this position. I really do think that the right path, even though it may be philosophically wrong in a standard kind of year, would be to tap into that ESF for the 1 year time to buy more time for communication, to get those things, the pension plan, the override discussions going, potentially school choice if we really want to go there. Any of these other options like fundraising, right? These things all take time. They're not going to ever be done within 3 months. Or I guess now going to our 4th month here. And it really concerns me that this is the situation, but it's not a DEI versus math. It's not a sustainability versus math. It's not a ABA or mental health or ELL against math, right? That's unfortunately the situation where essentially we come into because of fungible dollars. But the reality is, we're forced to choose a priority, and uncomfortably, but understandably, I guess, say math is going to be our core option because I think it will help the majority of our kids, regardless of what grade level they're in, what they look like, what they believe in. Sorry, I'm trying to control my emotions here a little bit. It's frustrating, but we just got to do what's right at the end of the day.
Laredo?
So thank you, and thank you, Jonathan, for your thoughts. And Victor, I appreciate what you have to say. Let me try to be clear with the pension bond and the other relief we're trying to seek regarding the pensions. Our plan for funding over the next 2 years after this one depends on getting that pension relief. Now, I'm pretty confident that we are going to be able, I hope the city council approves it. It was docketed. It's getting referred to the finance committee, goes to finance committee next Monday night, goes to the full council on the 27th. That's just, to be clear, the first step in the process. From there, it goes to the state legislature. The legislature has to pass a home rule petition. We've already talked to our state delegation. They're very supportive of that, but again, it requires the vote of the legislature, not just the 4 members who represent the city of Newton. And then it comes back to the city council after more work, and we have to actually go out for a specific bond. So I want to be very clear, this is not a simple process. We also have been asking the retirement board to restructure the date of the when we have to meet our obligation, and we've offered to increase the cost of living. I think I've explained that Again, that's not a decision I get to make, but we need both those things to come into play to really get to the point where we can provide that 4.9% funding over the next couple of years. And then we have to think beyond that. And I think Jonathan is 100% right about this carry forward. We are going to have to start trying to address it. I've been giving some thought with my team about how we address it. That's something we're going to start talking about this summer. But I also have to be clear, we can't go to the Education Stabilization Fund and just start taking more money out of it, because our whole plan for funding going forward depends on what's in there right now. And if we deplete that, we're going to have less money going forward, and we're going to create a worse situation down the road. So I really think we are committed to working collaboratively with the school committee, with the superintendent. Nobody likes to cut. It's a lot easier not to do it. Those are difficult choices that you have to make. I am going to support Plan B, as I indicated earlier. There's not a third option as far as I'm concerned. We have been very clear from day one. And I just have to reiterate, we were clear from day one because I did not want to engage in gamesmanship. I did not want to have the kind of discussions I've seen, frankly, in the past in school committee mayoral discussions where the mayor comes in with a low number and the school committee pleads, and the mayor suddenly finds a little bit of extra money and everyone goes home somewhat happy. I've never felt that's a good way of budgeting. And again, I'm going to commit not only my colleagues here, but to the public, that the work for 28 and 29 and 30 begins as soon as we get done with this year's budget. We are going to be doing that. We're blocking off time to meet with the superintendent over the summer. We are going to figure out how we address the carry forward. I'm not sure the best way to do that. And we have to be clear about what we can do in a sustainable manner and what we can't do. And if we can't do it, we're going to be upfront with the committee and the superintendent as well. But I'm confident that we're going to get to a place that's going to continue to make this system grow and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan. I started writing down bullets, and a lot of them were in agreement. I have maybe one or two exceptions, but it was a very thoughtful message. I think we've said it in past meetings. I think we're very grateful for the feedback from the community. It's not easy to go up and share personal stories and impacts. I think were there no actual activity-driven impacts from any of these reductions, which of course there are, making these changes signals something, even if it's unintended or incorrect, it signals something, and it causes real pain, as our chair has said in past, and I think we need to acknowledge that. I also want to repeat and agree with my colleagues that we really conceptually simply cannot pit excellence versus values. We can't do that as a district. That's just can't be who we are. And so as it relates to money and choices, et cetera, it's different. I think from my perspective, just being brief on a lot of the topics that were brought up, I could not agree more with Jonathan that we really do trust our superintendent to uphold our value, and have been in that process where our superintendent has led a large group of people to make sure we have a sense of what we want the values of our system to be and write them down. And I remember the part of the discussion, for example, where we did not want D, E, and I to be on one line because each of its component parts were too important. And we made them as core values, diversity separately from equity, separately from inclusion. I mean, that was the tone of that meeting. And so I think from that perspective, and hearing the administrative leaders, the teachers, the community members that all came together around the force of not just those initiatives, but all of the ones that were shown on the Thrive slide that we've looked at a few times, we're going to carry the mission forward. I think we've said as a committee, we want to understand the nuts and bolts of that. We just have to correct one of the things we heard from the community, that it really can't work in the other direction, and the superintendent's kind of informed us of that. I mean, we trust her to keep the mission moving, and we are going to get an update on how that's going to work, because that has to happen over time. So I'm supportive of that and do extend that trust that you articulated. I think Victor and Jonathan, you both said this in different ways. I personally could not agree more that making this investment in math, specifically 8 math interventionists in our middle schools, which do not have those resources right now, and which, as we've talked about in previous meetings, are showing tremendous results when we've made those investments in systems at the elementary level. I truly believe that is us upholding our values. I think that is us upholding our values. And so I think for that reason, most of all, is why I'm supportive of my colleague's motion. A couple of other things I wanted to address that were mentioned today and in other points of comment. I just want to reiterate what the superintendent said, that this is not the prior system of math, that tracking of yesteryear, and that's why we need the investment. We need the investment to make sure it has on-ramps and off-ramps that really work. I think that's really important. Change is complicated, and it does require a lot of work, and we, I don't think for this big of a lift, there's any way to do it in a way that doesn't feel fast. This has not been a rushed process, in the sense that the math discussion, the feedback from the community, the construction of the plan with feedback from teachers, this has been happening over months and months and months. So I think those things are all important to recognize as well as we evaluate the path forward. Finally, this I think maybe is a little outside the scope of today's motion, which I've said I'm supportive of, but I just want to pick up on some of the next year stuff that came up in some of folks' comments and from the public. I think we are right to worry about that. I think we also have reasons for optimism. I think it's really, really important for us to realize that there can be surprises. And this was maybe the one point I'd quibble with Jonathan was, yes, the big drivers of the very nice seesaw slide we knew about. We knew that we had big, big moves on salaries, probably healthcare, although I was more optimistic that it wouldn't be so close to the double-digit growth number it was. And we just saw that. The challenge is that leaves us just the shred of what do we do with the rest of the money. And those really were surprises. And I went back to some analysis we did where we looked at 2019 to 26, what have the non-personnel expenses did? And as a category, that grew by 3% year on year over the last 7 years, 19 to 26. And then you go back and look at what we ended up with this time around, and over as a total category, it was 11. And we had things like equipment going up 17%. Contract services, maybe we could have seen around the corner, but I don't think we realized it was going to be a 34% increase. Utilities, 19, 20% increase. So I think those were surprises. I think that really was a surprise. And the reason why I bring that up and quibble on it, and I apologize, because I don't think it's at the heart of any of what you said, is because it affects next year. Because once again, we don't know where we're going to be next year. And in the scheme of Prop 2.5, I think a 4.9% number sounds pretty good. That sounds like prioritizing the schools. And yet I look at this chart of the surprises and I'm worried again, still. And so that's why I really applaud what the mayor has suggested of we've got to get together early on what the schools need. I really applaud both my colleagues and the mayor's comments on thinking about the carry forward and how do we address that. I think that would be a big deal for our district. So this isn't perfect. It's not without pain. I think we are headed in the right direction with my colleague's motion. So that's what I plan to support. Thanks.
Tamika. Thanks, Alicia. So I just want to start by saying that Plan C is a fiction. Plan C doesn't really exist. I saw last year a school committee take the extraordinary measure of saying allocation schmallocation. We're going to do our own thing. That doesn't work because in our system of government, the mayor's allocation is what is going to be submitted to our city council. And whether we approve it or whether they approve it, it is the pool of funds within which we get to play. That's the reality onto that fiction. So I'm just going to put that out there. It is very clear that it's a foregone conclusion that we are going to vote approval of the superintendent's proposed budget, Plan B, that includes the math pathways. It's also a foregone conclusion that I, in the exercise of my fiduciary duty, would be remiss in not voting that approval. However, it is also incumbent on this committee to live its values and model that for our community, for our students, for our staff in our district, by prioritizing what it would look like if we insert into this process a priority add back provision. And so I will make a friendly amendment that the school committee, let's see, as additional funds are realized throughout the budget season, as they inevitably always are and will be, that the superintendent return to the school committee for determination of a priority of add backs in a priority determined by the school committee. That is the motion that, or the amendment that I'm making, and I'll pause here.
Is there a second? Second, Victor? So we will pause debate on the motion and we will debate the amendment itself now.
So if I can, if I
Yes, go
can
ahead.
continue. So thanks, Victor. So for point of discussion, the reason I believe that's important is because I think you cannot separate, though we might want to, the changes that are happening now at this time from the changes that would happen under some other federal government, some other national thing that's invading our daily lives and our psyches. And so it does feel like a retreat from commitments that this committee and this district has made. And at a time when retreating is certainly not what I want to do. And it doesn't seem as though that is what's desired by our community. Retreating from things like sustainability. We are a community that prides ourselves on these measures. And for this district to pull back from those efforts without someone keeping our eye firmly, squarely on that goal is a mistake. Same for our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Same for our SEL interventionist. I feel that these are positions that we are walking away from, that we ought to be finding a path to preserve. And so even if now we have to make the trade-offs to say that we have to move forward with this budget and it doesn't include these positions, there will be funding that is identified throughout the course of the year, whether we are doing our due diligence by increasing the tuition on some, the students in the CAPS program, whether we as a committee are moving forward with school choice as a measure that's wholly under our control, whether we as a committee are looking at additional fee structures, whatever, what have you, these are the things that we should and ought to do. And so it is our perspective or our responsibility then to direct what happens with those funds and with the funds that will come in from, I don't know, the revolving accounts being super inflated and not inflated. Sorry, Liam, I don't mean to say that, but being replenished at a rate that beyond which is projected. So that's the motion. That's the thinking behind it. It simply is to say, if and when funds are identified, it comes back to us and we get to decide what to do with those funds. It's kind of a no-brainer because we do anyway, but it makes me feel like our words somehow matter.
So can I clarify some things about that motion and then I'll come to you? How would it be different than how it's usually done? Because if we're going to enact something, I think it should be something that we can implement. And typically when funds come in, it's a grant for something specific, or if you find something in a revolving account, you usually have a plan because you need a teacher in a new place because a kid moved in, or I guess I'm wondering, how would this be different? And does your motion contain a specific list of how we would do that? I think we just have to get down to brass tacks on it if we want to understand how to vote.
Sure. Well, we know the positions that have been put up for reduction removal in this budget. So I think at this point, it's not necessary to be specific and proscriptive in inserting in right now in this motion the list, but that we as a committee would decide which positions, and that really depends a lot on the funding. And as we know, money is fungible, so it comes in as a grant. Well, actually, that's a poor example because grants are usually tied to a specific purpose. I'm talking more about, revolving accounts, fees increases, utilities. It's not going to happen, but things that, free up funds that have been assumed as one rate, and in actuality come back at another. Positions that we're not able to fill, things like that. Those are savings that are realized.
But we do not have authority over the specific personnel decisions that the superintendent and her team make. So how would we say these are the priority list of the positions that were reduced that we would put back? We don't actually have that authority.
Well, I mean, with respect, if we were to say to the superintendent that we are not cutting sustainability per se, she can choose to hire whomever she would like to, but the position itself would remain. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do, but I don't think we have the operational authority to choose positions. Am I wrong? You have insight?
I can't support this motion. Not only do we not have the operational authority to do it, but you're making assumptions, and I think frankly, giving false hope to folks that somehow a position in the next 2 months is going to be reinstated. That's just not happening. We have a budget. The superintendent's stated what she thinks that budget is going to be. She's given us a whole bunch of assumptions, including a bunch of assumptions, frankly, that are very tight on a whole bunch of different areas. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions in there. She doesn't have any wiggle room. So I just don't see this being at all practical, realistic, or part of our budget process. And I would strongly urge us, I appreciate the sentiment, I really do. But I don't, this is not how you budget by saying, if we somehow find money in October or November, this is what we're going to do with it. I just don't think that's at all realistic and not what a budget's for. So I'm going to urge my colleagues to reject this.
So there is precedent for school committees, the recent one that is, inserting a priority add back list as part of the budget process. Those were, I can't remember, my memory is not so good, but that did happen. And so it's a suggestion, I think one that has the flexibility built in that allows us to make decisions as they're feasible, and one that doesn't overly prescript an outcome that is not guaranteed. You know, I don't think any member of the staff whose job we've been debating is going to find any comfort in this. So I don't think it's offering false hope. I think it's more that we as a committee are exercising our discretion to direct the superintendent in this way.
Linda?
I also appreciate the sentiment. I do not know if we have that authority, but my concern with the concept is if one of these budgets is approved, the superintendent is jiggling some things around and moving responsibilities that she has shared. The reality is how that works out may be more difficult in one area or easier than another area. That one I feel like cannot predict 4 months down the road how it goes. So I feel like we may feel philosophically that something is most important, but in how it gets enacted from a budgetary perspective, I think falls out in how these things work themselves out. So I feel like it would be forcing something that may not actually be necessary if Anna and our team, you know, are able to move things around. And like I said, there may be surprises. Some things are easier to absorb, other things are harder. So I think from that standpoint, I would be hesitant to do so, to prescribe it.
If I may. You may. So thanks, Linda. I think that's a really important thing to consider. And I suppose my response to that would be that, again, it's not overly prescriptive. This motion simply opens the door for the school committee at the time, if and when funds are identified, to be able to say, is there enough to increase or restore one of these positions which has been reduced or eliminated? And is there a then present need to make the change? If there is not, because we're happy with the transition plan, it's been successful, it's working well, then that falls out of priority. If however, there is still a need to, we haven't been able to have green team meet. I'm simply giving examples, but there are things that have fallen off and this committee says, hold on, not good. We would like to make sure we restore that because it's important. This preserves the ability to do that. And again, I feel like the school committee already has that ability. This is simply formalizing it as we look to approve this budget.
We'll go Jason and then Ari.
Thank you. I also like the sentiment of this amendment. I think it does acknowledge the fact that it's the pressure of the budget that's forced tough decisions. I think my pragmatic concerns are twofold, and maybe taking them one by one. You know, I think as it relates to, we ended up with more money than we thought at the end of the year. You know, I had a couple reactions just playing that out. I mean, right now, if I'm not mistaken, we're still under a hiring freeze to try to get to our target carry forward, which we're behind on still. Is that?
That's right.
So I think what we're contemplating is, despite the pressure we're experiencing there, we end up with more cash at the end of the year on a one-time basis. Is what I think I'm understanding my colleague's motion to be talking about. Is that correct? Or are we talking, let me actually finish my concern, because I don't want to ask a partial question. For me, what would be required, I think, is not only that we had that happy surprise despite, I think, the pressure we're already experiencing, but also that surprise came with a re-budgeting item that made us feel that there was ongoing savings attached to it. You know, otherwise, if we are using that one-time item, it's illusory. It's something that's going to support a role extension for a year, I guess. So I just want to make sure I'm thinking about the motion correctly in that sense.
I would say you are, and the corollary to that, the way you're thinking about it, is it puts some impetus on this committee to get busy raising funds, doing our part to ensure that those replenishing dollars are somewhat guaranteed.
Thanks. So if I may continue. So that's helpful. And I do think that's an important characterization as we evaluate this, is it's a bridge. If I'm playing it back, it's a bridge of a time frame, whether it's a year or however it may work out, to find supportive money, which I think is reasonable but different than finding the money in the budget. I do have a pragmatic concern, I think along the lines of what, Linda, you were describing around the decision rights here, because as we know, the hiring freeze, et cetera, is not without consequence as well. And, you know, needs may emerge among students. And so from my perspective, regardless of what degree of line item we can get down to, which in my understanding is a gray area in terms of what the school committee should or should not be directing. In my view, the school committee, I think we would want to be, is one that empowers our superintendent to hear our priorities, which I think hopefully we all agree with, the areas that are feeling the pain from this, but leave the decision rights with our leader. So those are my two reactions to the amendment as it's currently framed.
All right. Thank you. So I'm going to probably echo a few things that have already been said. I initially support the sentiment of it. I think it's more like, in my head, as someone who's in a policy world in my day job, it's like passing a resolution in a sense. Like, we still want to be committed to this. I would love clarification or like official word, because I'm really hesitant on this. It's not in my understanding of our position that to dictate like personnel, and because just the way it was phrased initially, that's what it feels like. So it feels like it's not even something, and I don't know if Dr. Nolan or Jill or whoever, I don't know, just clarification on that, because that really is where my hesitation lies. And maybe it's a larger conversation, because I do agree with the sentiment of how do we keep these commitments to the community that has very clearly been voiced in our view. And maybe that's at a later meeting, having public discussion of it's a resolution or a policy or something like that, that just reminds us that as we continue our work as a committee, we continue to keep those in our vision and supporting our superintendent with that. But the personnel issue is where I'm hesitating, and it feels in my gut wrong, because it doesn't feel like it's within our purview specifically, just based on how the motion was specifically set out. So that's where
Victor?
So I want to first start by complimenting my colleague for at least being creative and thinking of solutions. I did second the motion because I thought it was important to have this discussion. 2 points. One, the part that makes me mildly uncomfortable with the thing is that this is, we've had a lot of time to consider the Plan A, Plan B, and a virtual Plan C. This is an interesting amendment. I have my own personal views, which I'll hold in terms of whether it's permissible or not. But it really doesn't matter what my personal views are. It just comes down to what's actually legal, I guess. But I kind of want to pause it. I think there is an opportunity, even though this would be an amendment, I think there's an opportunity to potentially revisit this down the road if we need to do so. I don't know if we need to necessarily decide this tonight, is my first reaction. My second reaction is, I wonder if there's another way to go about doing this, where if we are able to, this hopefully won't be a surprise to you, Dr. Nolan, but heads up, if we want to express the importance of DI-related initiatives that are productive, like recruiting more educators that look like our students, for example. If we want to maintain sustainable initiatives, we want to do ABA, again, all these unfortunate cuts that have happened as a by the wayside. I would say that the way to do it is through our remit of controlling the goals and objectives that the superintendent has, that we lay out what those particular outcomes we would like to see are for her to administer and direct as she sees fit. In other words, if, for example, the way to solve that problem is through backfills, through consulting, through getting these folks, great. If it's through other kind of mechanisms, that's, I think, your discretion to make that call. But if we do it through I think we are on firm ground to say that we set them as goals and responsibilities for her evaluation, then we iterate our importance there while preserving the discretion that I believe the superintendent should have. So yeah, just two thoughts there.
And
feel conflicted. I have this, I don't like being put in a box, and I feel like we're in a box on this vote. So I want to assert some authority and show some independence, and there's no third thing. I was taught to think in threes. I only got two on this one. I also think that we trust and support our superintendent, and to lean into this feels a little like micromanaging. I also think that she's very smart. The community input has been very clear. She knows what we know. She's heard what we have heard. When she makes her spending decisions within the budget, she's doing complex multivariable calculus about, this is what I heard from the community. This is what's going to break if I don't put money into it. This is the risk I've taken on. And so I would struggle to indicate a lack of trust in her to be able to do that math and figure out what needs the funding the most. I also do agree with what's been noted a couple of times. We will stay in her ear about what we value and what we want to see fixed. I think she probably knows what we want to see is we want to see all these people happy. We want to say yes to everybody and give them the stuff that they care about. So I think she knows that right now. And I'll end by saying Jason's pragmatic concerns, like how often are we going to be having these conversations and these votes? It's a $340 million budget every week. Stuff's moving, going up and down a little bit, and we just sort of can't be making every dial change along the way with her. So those are my concerns about it.
Call the question, maybe?
Yep.
Can I call the question?
Yes, you may. We'll vote. Let's take a vote. Would you like to restate your motion for us, just so that you can use your language? I tried. Do you want me to try? Do you want me to try?
I mean, I scribbled it down on my notepad, but I don't. So, as additional funds are realized throughout the fiscal year, move that the superintendent identify these sums for school committee priority add back determination, something like that. That's what I scribbled.
Okay. What I captured. So we will vote Ward 1.
No.
Ward 2.
No.
Ward 3.
No.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Ward 5.
No.
Ward 6.
No.
Ward 7 is a no. Ward 8.
With respect, no.
Mayor Laredo.
No.
Okay. Amendment does not pass, 8-1. And we will move back to the main motion. Ari, you are up next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, before we got into the amendment, stole my initial thought of, but I'm going to highlight it again because I think for me, this has been my real guiding force with the math pathways is those 8 MTSS positions that are being added in at the middle school level. Dr. Nolan shows us constantly that it's working at the elementary school. And as somebody who came from a family who Newton Public School was the only option, there was no private school, no plan B. It really brings me a lot of confidence in our school system that it's working. And I've said it in a public meeting before that if we were to throw our hands up at the middle school, it would feel really irresponsible. So I just want to highlight that. And then just a few commentary. For myself, I do have to center the students at the decision we're making here tonight. And I'm really grateful that Dr. Nolan has provided us with options with very minimal impact to the kind of classroom. but that doesn't mean there's no impact. I think we've heard it from community members and from educators and from families that there is going to be somewhat of an impact, and that's not minimal, and I don't take that lightly. But I fear if we were to start debating an option C, we're going to just go back to the drawing board, and it's going to be the impacts on the classroom. And that's something that I can't consciously do. So I am supportive of tonight's motion made by Member Green, but I do acknowledge and hold space for the impacts that the people in our community may feel, and I don't take it lightly. And I will say, I want to speak probably for a majority of us, that we did read every single email that came through. That's something I'm an organizer by trade, so I love seeing community engagement. I don't think we're going to see any of you go away. We're going to continue to see you folks engage in the schools, and I'm grateful for that, because I think that's what helps us make a great school system, is hearing from you guys as we kind of move forward and navigate this position as a new committee for a majority of us. So with that, I yield back.
Victor?
I'll just make one last comment on this, which is my encouragement to our friends out there that there's something called the Newton Schools Foundation. If you are so inclined and moved, please look into it. Consider donating. As you can tell, money's important.
Mika?
So the amendment was something that kind of popped up as we were talking and I was listening to you fellas. It's not the thing that I wanted to talk about. The thing I wanted to talk about was this undergirding something that we've heard articulated from some folks at public comment in our inboxes and quite frankly up here at the table, which is that it's okay in a certain respect to trade DEI specifically for math intervention. I'm just going to characterize it that way because that's the way that it's been characterized, that it's a trade from one to justify the other. That is somehow warranted because math intervention is the thing that's going to close the achievement gap. To that, I say, maybe. Maybe. We don't know. What we know is that the MTSS intervention that we have at elementary school has made no discernible or practicable impact on the Black, Brown, ELL, students with disabilities, that 30% cohort that was struggling when we started that effort and continues to struggle today. So maybe MTSS is going to be the thing that moves the needle. Maybe. But the other thing, Newton is not new to interventionists. And so we have had interventionists at middle school in the past. And so from my perspective, it would be instructive to go back and look at those time periods and see, well, did we make that discernible, practical close of the achievement gap during those times when Newton, in fact, had these positions? If we didn't, then it's kind of the incumbent on us to say, well, how is this going to be different? What about this is potentially going to move the needle? Is it the way it's structured? Is it the supports? Is it the rotation? What is it? And I think those are very practical, very logical, very reasonable questions to have and to ask our superintendent to report back to us on. Because next year, I can almost guarantee that 4.9% allocation or not, we are highly likely to be back in a scenario where we are struggling to figure out how do we keep our 8 middle school math interventionists? What are we trading off next year in order to make the math work? I know that there aren't very many things that we haven't already cut. Very many things that don't impact our student experience and classroom experience that we're going to have available from which to draw funds from. So, short of inserting funds into this district in ways that we as a school committee control, We shouldn't be saying it's okay to trade off this or these categories of positions in order to support this thing, because we don't know for sure that it's going to work, not for that reason, not to close the achievement gap. It's a hope at this point. And we don't know if we're going to be able to keep it from year over year. So for me, like I started, it's a foregone conclusion. This budget approval will happen. But the question that we need to ask is, how do we ensure that we can sustain the positions that we're adding? And I don't think we can answer that question right now.
Go ahead.
I just want to agree on, I think, one of your core points there, which is first, and I think it was a fair characterization of what we heard in that MTSS update, that we are seeing the elementary MTSS, both in math and in literacy, make meaningful improvements on growth rates for the cohorts who are below benchmark. And yet I think we heard directly that we're not seeing that with an exclamation mark when we recut the data among the demographics who we know predominantly make up those behind benchmarks, or have disproportionate, I should say, have disproportionate representation in those cohorts. And so I do think we need to continue to gather data on that. I think we're going to want to see data on how it's working in middle school. I mean, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, there were many different ways that I don't know if we call them interventionists, but those supporting roles were working across the 4 middle schools in past. But I do think we're moving towards, if I'm understanding correctly, a more cohesive, singular approach that parallels what we're doing in elementary, that is data-driven, et cetera. So without saying categorically it's different, that is my understanding, that it's at least more uniform and matches where we've seen positive results. And totally agree, we need to measure it and make sure it is moving. And I think we do want the answer on the demographics over time as well, because I can't come up with the reason as a layperson why it should be working on segments who have needs and not in all the segments we want. So if that's the case, then we need to figure out the why on that. I couldn't agree more. From my perspective, until we have results to the contrary, I still think I have a ton of enthusiasm for the program.
Anything you wanted to add about?
Yeah, I guess I just want to point the committee back to our midwinter analysis of what we knew in January, which is that 2 of our elementary schools actually did close the achievement gap for Black students, 2. 3 others showed higher than average growth for all students on IEPs and ELL students. Now, is that perfect picture for everyone? No, it's not. We just received our early intervention literacy data for kindergarten. There are only 50 students district-wide right now in this district that are below benchmark in reading in kindergarten. Our educators are kicking it. And I believe, that said, I want all the things. I want all the things that are on the chopping block. I want all the things that we're talking about. I want the goals. Victor's right. We have the goals. It's the Thrive 2030 plan. We can't let off the gas. And that includes all the values from 150 different stakeholders over a 2-year period who told us what those values are. This committee voted it. You hold me accountable for it every year, and it is my pleasure to uphold that and my point of pride to move my team to do it. So whatever the number is, we will do the best that we can for Newton children, and we will uphold the core values that have been stated here by citizen after citizen in the best way that we can, knowing that we can't create miracles if we don't have funds. And that's the tough job about being a superintendent. It's a tough job about being an educator. But I believe we will win over the needs of the children. We will make that happen.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Dr. Nolan. I think I spent several minutes talking about my point of view on the need to have a concrete plan forward and the need to be able to understand how we are going to fund how we are going to have a school system and a funding mechanism that gives us clarity on how this comes together over the next couple of years. And it can't be from robbing last year to pay next year. So, Tamika, I hear you and I agree. And I for one am there. I think the thing that I maybe would push back on a little bit is I don't think that if we allow that, if we allow that fear right here in the room to push us to throw out the things that we know that we need to be doing, we're just going to be stuck. And so there is an element of which I do believe that we are taking a little bit of a leap of faith that we're going to figure this out over the next couple of years. We're going to figure it out because we're going to get together. We're going to work through it. We're going to figure it out because Dr. Nolan is going to do extraordinary things. We're going to figure it out because we're going to work with the mayor, and we're going to figure out how we find more money for the school system. But if we allow ourselves to shut down in the face of the what could be of next year, I think we're going to be very stuck. I would also say that I was in the room and I was in the audience because I was not yet on the school committee when Dr. Nolan addressed the school committee late last year about the achievement gaps and the things and the way the achievement gaps have persisted through the schools. You very pointedly and very rightly sort of looked at Dr. Nolan and said, "What are you going to do? Right? What is the plan? Like, how are you going to fix this? Because we've been talking about it for a long time and there has been no plan." It is hard for me to be in a position where we are simultaneously saying to Dr. Nolan, "What is the plan?" and then turning around and saying, "Gee, it might not work, so we shouldn't do it." So I think I struggle with that, to be honest with you. And I just feel that I need to say that here in light of that.
Alicia, if I may, real quick.
Go ahead, please.
Correcting the record.
Please.
I am absolutely not saying we don't do this. I'm doing it. I'm voting yes. I think we should do this. My point was we can't equally be cavalier about what it's going to bring because we don't know. We can hope, but we don't know. Hope is a powerful thing. I think I'm quoting from a movie. I don't know which one, but I hear it in my head. Hope is a powerful thing, and I think we need to have it. And if this is the thing, backed by some really positive data points, if this is the thing that is going to move the needle, then it is incumbent upon us to pursue it. It's also equally incumbent upon us to keep it.
Great.
One of the things that struck me over the course of the last few weeks is that we have a gap. We can say what's going away, put it up on slides, and we can't talk with accuracy about what's going to replace it and what's coming next because of impact or bargaining, as Dr. Nolan tells us. So a lot of people just see the what's missing and they don't feel where the bridge is going to. I think that I would record an ask, Dr. Nolan, that you're going to owe the public transition plans as soon as that impact bargaining is done and the conversations are at a point where you know exactly what work is going where and who is doing what.
Well, I'll do you one better, Ben, that your docket team today told me the exact date upon which that will occur.
Great.
So that will be June 15th.
With her input.
Just because of that.
You demand bargain to that.
Yeah. I didn't mean it to sound as like demandy as it did. Docket comes together to say what's on the agenda for all the meetings throughout the year. So we agree the community deserves a transition plan. I will give you that transition plan. There's a lot of human parts in the middle right now and impact negotiations that are going on. We're trying to take care of our people and our values at the same time while we're implementing this very hard thing. So we're doing that. And I'm going to respectfully just ask the time to get that done in a respectful way for those people. And then I will come back and I will take your feedback on whether you feel that those solutions are the right ones.
Great, thank you. Good job, docket team. That's number one. Number two, we need to ask the faculty and the staff and the parents to take a breath. Let's see what happens next year and then tell us if stuff broke, right? Tell Dr. Nolan, this used to happen and now it's not happening so that we know what the impacts are. $340 million budget, 11,000 plus students, we can't know everything that's going on unless folks are elevating it to us for us to know. It's the impacts that we want to be able to measure and understand and know that we're reacting to. Three, I think we need to hold ourselves accountable to our values, which has been said a few times, and I want to make mention that in that light, for those who were tuned in last week, we had our legislators here. They said, bring us, they came to us after the meeting and said, bring us your asks. How can we help? And we made asks. And the biggest ask in terms of numbers, and we'll see what we get. We can't budget around this yet, but our ask said that we want a big check for professional development and conference attendance for our diverse educators, training for DEI fellows, affinity spaces, learning groups, fellowship stipends, to develop a building-based network of leadership across the Newton Public Schools. We're proud to ask for that. If we get what we asked for, our DEI budget next year will be on par, maybe bigger than our total budget this year. It will be allocated differently. It will not be as sustainable because it's not coming through regular funding. But I think that those are the kinds of commitments that we will have the opportunities to make throughout the year, to say that we're not standing down from the things we stand for. We're finding ways to make our dollar go as far as it can in the classrooms. And so that's, that's the point that Ari mentioned, that we are centering the students. We're protecting the classrooms and the educators in the buildings. Prior cuts have caused pain there. One of the things we're doing here is sending reinforcements to the classroom, right? So middle school math is going to get the obvious reinforcement. We also have classrooms where we got feedback up through student services that the grades were not functioning in the compacted groups, and we are adding sections back to spread the kids out in those classrooms and solve a problem that we created when we cut too close to the bone last time around. So, my summary of where we're at is that we trust and support our superintendent. She's put two paths in front of us. And I think for us to force a third path against the recommendations that she's offered would feel like undermining her. So I think these are the paths we're looking at right now. And it was clear to me, I said last week, when I look at the waterfall chart of what we are doing to pay for math in option B, that's a good trade-off. If anybody's wondering what is leading the hate mail race in our boxes this week, it is math by a long shot. We get the most mails about math. And that's consistent with all of the sort of conversations around town. People feel we are behind where we can be. We are behind where we used to be. We're behind where our peers are. It's not simply about accelerating the savant students. It's about everybody. It's about a rising tide here. And we think that our team has put together a pathways plan that apparently the state is looking to replicate. So we think that this is the plan. This is the way that we're going to bring all of our students up. And so I'm firmly supportive that doing math is the right way to go.
I'll add a few remarks. So we keep joking about path C, like there's no path C. And there is a path C. And I think it was something that we sort of didn't even want to look at the beginning because of how unsavory it is. But I think we should talk about it because it's important that we understand the kinds of trade-offs we're making. Path C is not getting more money because I think the mayor has taken into account not only the Education Stabilization Fund itself, but its interest earning over the past couple of years. They've done a full financial analysis. That's how they arrived at the historic number. So I trust that those numbers are those numbers. But we should talk about the broad trade-offs here. So if you look at the two tranches of cuts, it's about $2 million of personnel cuts. If you want to get to, and that's after the enrollment adjustments at the elementary level, which were another 5 cuts. If you want to get to $2 million of personnel cuts in the classrooms, that's 18 to 20 teachers. So you immediately have to go to things like the superintendent brought up early on, which is a non-mandated item, music, art, PE, library. You immediately go to those things. And then beyond that, you're not going to get 18 to 20 educator cuts just there. You're going to have to go to classroom sizes at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. All of these things would be impacted if we did that. And so while I feel like the cuts to central office are very painful, and they're like an assault on our values, right? So they should feel painful. I think that the students would be hurt more by us cutting 20 people who are in classrooms every day interfacing with them. I just think that that's the truth. And so that's kind of how I get to this really icky trade-off place, is what would happen in the classrooms. So if we do this budget approval tonight, which feels like it's a train out of the station, we replace a financial gap with a work gap. And so I think our job as a committee is to hold the superintendent and her team accountable and ourselves accountable for being vigilant about getting that work done, reporting out on that work, not just in June, but we talked about perhaps having a cadence to make sure that we're really on top of it, so that we can make sure that it's moving forward. You mentioned some of the immediate things that are happening with finances, funding from the legislative folks. We also are looking into some potential Medicaid reimbursements that one of our educators, or a few of our educators, have brought up for ABA services that could help us with that. That would be probably not a big dollar amount, but it would actually be sustainable if it was something that worked out. So we're investigating those things. And I think ultimately it is important that we do math this year. I think when we are in these positions, like I said at the last meeting, we have to put our money where our educational outcomes are, and that's MTSS. So I am also a fan of Path B. I recommend that we call it Path B instead of Plan B. Just a little nit. No, I think you said Path. I think you said Path. But we have been using both. If there is no further discussion, I will call the question. So I'm going to restate the motion. Jonathan moved that the school committee approve an FY27 budget of $574,126, consistent with the mayor's allocation, and the Path B proposal from the superintendent, which includes sufficient resources to ensure full implementation of middle school math MTSS and the Math Pathways program, and submit it to City Council. We will take a roll call vote. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7 is a yes. Ward 8?
Regrettably, yes.
Mayor Laredo?
Yes.
9-0, we have passed the budget. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, I
Go
heard
ahead.
you say the words adjourn.
I didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Before we adjourn, I would like to reiterate something, insert into the docketing process, the meetings on school choice, and accelerate those soon before
They
our
are soon.
before our feet are too comfortable with the withdrawn fire.
So they are
Urgency goes away.
starting on the 29th of April.
Excellent.
We will start with the school choice overview.
And the hearing, there'll be a public hearing on May 11th, 6:15.
Is that the normal timeline, or is that an accelerated timeline?
It's normal, but it is as accelerated as it can be because our next meeting is April 29th.
Oh, God. Okay.
I'll just make one final comment. I do want to throw appreciation out there for Alicia, for Jason, and for Ben, and for the mayor as well too, because I know there's a lot of conversations that do take place behind the scenes, and that's a lot of work. So thank you for your efforts on that front as well too.
Great, we're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, community.
You,